ICQ Podcast, episode 431, Dayton Hamvention, part 1. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 431st episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Togi Carlson, Kilo 1, Sierra Echo India, and our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we're joined by Martin M1MRB, Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is part 1 of our interviews and stories from Dayton Hamvention in this year 2024. Well, as always, we're very grateful for your wonderful support of your ICQ podcast, and say Togi Carlson, Kilo 1, Sierra Echo India, very kindly donated to us in cash in person at Dayton Hamvention. We really do appreciate your support, Togi, and as I say, we had a great chat there at the show, and we did appreciate your time. Now, also our monthly subscription donors provide us a wonderful base, and without their support, we really couldn't do your show for you advert free, and we really would like to thank them as always for doing their part and supporting the show as well. If you find value in what we do, we ask for a very simple logic. Turn that value into a monetary figure. Go along to icqpodcast.com/donate. Select one of the options there for yourself, or choose an open one there, and send that value our way, and we'll put that towards your ICQ podcast show, the running costs, etc., which helps us keep us advert free and providing you an independent show as always. Right, well, now we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank and Bill to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including issues with the ARRL headquarters systems, and also strategic priorities at the RSGB. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode's ICQ Podcast News Roundtable for episode 431. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin. Hi, guys.
Yeah, good to hear you again. I know we've just spent sort of 12 days together roaming the States, but we're back now, aren't we, Chris?
We certainly are. Jet lag is still with me, I'm afraid, but well, for here in person at least.
Yeah. Well, let's hope you get over it fairly quickly. I'm guessing the next person's hoping to get me into trouble sometime today, Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL. Hi, mine.
The news story is going to get you in trouble, but I'm surprised that they let you back into the States after the last time you went there. But hello, welcome back.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, if you believe Chris, I spoke to 50% of every American that ever existed in the USA, including
at least 50%. At least 50%.
Yeah.
Everything Chris says, because I know Chris and I know what you're like, Martin.
Yeah. Well, maybe another time, but Chris had a real panic when I started talking to the sheriff. Anyway, let's move on. I would like to welcome, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Hey, Martin, and as long as the song I Shot the Sheriff wasn't playing when you spoke to him, you probably made it through okay.
I certainly did, Frank. He was a good guy, actually. I probably got away with it because I had got an English accent, but real nice guy. And when I had sat and stood and chat to him for a few minutes.
You know, I've just got this vision of you talking to like James Garner, like from Support Your Local Sheriff as a sheriff. I'm sure they don't look like that now, but that's what I've just got the vision of now.
Yeah. And last but not least today is our Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. And Bill and I were at Dayton together, so good to hear you again, Bill.
Yeah, it's good to be back. We had a great trip and a great set of interviews coming here in the next few episodes. And good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good evening. And last but not least, unfortunately, Mr. Leslie Butterfield can't join us tonight at G0CIB, but he'll be back on another podcast. So, we'll see you soon, Leslie. Right, let's start our first news story. Hackers gain access to the ARRL headquarter database system or headquarter-based systems. Now, that's quite a worrying. That's a cyber attack. Chris, you work in IT. What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure where the words have come from here, so I don't know. We've got to be careful as to what we say. So I don't know if this actually is a cyber attack or not. It does say that a serious incident is involving our access to our network and headquarters-based systems. So it does sound like a cyber attack, but I'll have to wait and see what official notices come out of the ARRL. Certainly the wording sounds like it could well be that sort of thing. And I believe a logbook of the world has now been off the air for quite some time. So I'm guessing they're going through a recovery kind of instant response type process to get things back on the air. But it's something that might take a while.
Okay, Chris. Well, yeah, it's a bit worrying. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I certainly agree with Chris, and clearly this is out of the ordinary. I mean, it's not unusual for websites that we tend to access and things for them to go up and down. This is far, far beyond that. And I think if you take one system or perhaps two systems that a lot of members and some non-members use, it's Logbook of the World and the ARRL.net email alias system. I think the email alias system was down for a bit, but it came back up. So I don't know. I used to do computer security for the federal government back in the 90s, but, hey, the world has fundamentally changed. So I'll certainly defer to my colleagues, particularly Bill Barnes, who does that daily for his employer. Clearly out of the ordinary. Now, we can speculate, we can throw stones, we can do a whole lot of things. Their lack of what some members would want in transparency may or may not be valid. I'll let Bill comment on whether he thinks that is not. Sometimes, given the particular cyber event, you may not want to give full disclosure. I'll defer that to Bill. This did make Security Week magazine, which is, fairly significant play there. So I think they self-host. That in itself is not good, bad, or ugly. Certainly a hosting agent and company might give you some more industrial strength security on some things. It might not. This is the LOTW. I don't know who wrote that. There's sort of a lot of speculation about it. But boy, it really touches a nerve for the services, including the creation of the digital publications like QST. So the bad event, I think that's certainly something we can say, Martin, and certainly we hope that it will be rectified and things put in place so it doesn't happen again.
I'd like to add, I think sadly it's a fairly common event now, even though it's rare for an individual company. It is an increasing thing. We see lots of companies that get hit by these types of attacks. Particularly ransomware seems to be the thing that's these gangs that are based in little different parts of the world tend to find vulnerabilities in systems and breach them and then hold companies to ransom, and that's how they make money. And we don't know if that's the case here, but that's certainly becoming a much very, very common thing, sadly, around the world.
Yeah, no, certainly is, Chris, certainly is. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Okay, so, well, things get hacked. I mean, okay, lots of things get hacked every day. We know it. Even on my home router, I see alerts. Hey, someone's tried to get into your account and we've blocked it, or into your system and we've blocked it. We know there are automated things that go. I think even our club's website at one point had issues. Local church website here got hacked. We were trying to book the hall, and their website was a bit more, shall we say, adult orientated for a little while. If they are self-hosting, yeah, that can work. It can cost you quite a lot more, but if you're going to do that, there are things that you have to do if you are self-hosting. For example, security patches that you need to stay on top of. I used to work for a company that self-hosted, and there was a whole team of people that were dedicated to doing just that. They talk about only details from public records like name, address, and call signs, as I believe were compromised, but no credit card details or other sensitive info is stored and was lost. Let's see if I've read the stories right. Well, name, address, and call sign is bad enough. that kind of information. But I suppose if someone's already put that out there in the public domain, then you've kind of left yourself open to that. But this is a message to anybody that has any kind of online system and relating to being hacked or ransomware and things like that. 1, update your security patches. 2, keep backups. And then ransomware can't get you. And at least if you've got your security patches up to date, you're standing a fighting chance.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I've left Bill till last because I'm sure Bill will give us a much clearer idea of this, because this is what you do for a living, isn't it, Bill?
Yep. I'm not saying I want to context everything. I'm not saying it's a cyber incident for sure. However, their very first original story on the 16th really perked my ears up, because the following phrases are exactly from what I have at work. I created a ransomware playbook in 2017, and I ran a whole bunch of breach notifications and general user announcement notifications through our strategic marketing and communications team. So the following words in the first announcement really perked up my attention. Serious incident, I have that exact phrase in my notification on a ransomware attack. Restoring access and highest priority is also in there. And working with outside industry experts. I actually have a contract with a firm at work, so that as soon as we get hit with ransomware or a grocery list of other things, we bring them in to start basically capturing evidence, start the actual recovery, and also try to figure out how they got in, what they accessed, what they took, those kind of things. The next announcement came out on the 17th, and it said ARRL doesn't store credit card information or social security numbers, and it's publicly available information. So I pulled up the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act on data breach notifications, and their personal information that they define in that state is social security number, driver's license or state ID number, credit debit card number, financial account number combined with a security code, access or password, taxpayer identification number, identity protection personal number issued by the IRS, username and or email address combined with a password or security reset question and answer, and precise geolocating data. So I think I'm drawing an inference here, and I'm making a huge leap. But this second announcement was probably from their industry partners recommending that they release this piece of information so that they don't get into that 60-day window that Connecticut requires. So once you notice or discover or have evidence that someone accessed your personal identification, they have to, no later than 60 days, let each person who was affected notified. So there's also an update that they're still working through it on the 22nd, and there, other stuff in there, but that stuff jumped out at me as, keywords that just happen to match. And it could be coincidence, by the way, I could be all wrong, but matches exactly what I have in my ransomware playbook at work on notification. Just real briefly here, without dumping into the weeds too deeply, the dwell time for last year of a cyber attack fell to an average of 8 days. So that means someone gets into your network and within 8 days they start doing stuff. In the past, that was 500 and some days on some of the attacks, but that time is getting shorter and shorter and shorter because they realize they have a short window to work with before people start finding them through either various protection mechanisms or just that they have healthy log checking and log reviewing. So this is quite the story. Our playbook for hardware failure doesn't mention any of those phrases. Our playbook for like a general internet service available doesn't have any of those phrases in it, and I imagine that as soon as they got this contract, that they worked with their partners and immediately started getting out the legally required stuff that they had to report, which, I mean, right off the bat, if you have no breach, you still have to notify people that you had an incident, but there's no breach. So there's still some reporting requirements there. Likewise, and I just want to end on this a little bit. The ARRL may never tell us what happened, but pay close attention to every piece of information that comes out in the subsequent months. If they hire an information security professional, there's your answer. If the board authorizes a contract with a third party for instance, virtual CISO services, which I have two friends that's their day jobs now. They're virtual CISOs for like 4 different companies on contract. That's also your answer. So we may never actually get a full explanation, but watch carefully in the next year and a half, maybe 2, to see if there's any clues as to what really happened here.
Well, that's very, very interesting, Bill. And you summed it up at probably a greater level than I understood. And guys, if you didn't fully understand what Bill said, listen again, but be aware this was probably a serious attack, and the ARRL have got to do something about this.
Martin, let me just postscript this. So Bill mentioned this, and Chris had dug this up. The ARRL does have a job opening for a support associate. When you read the duties, it is not a solution for what Bill is describing. It is much more of a desktop support or desk support traditionally thing, because the experience is high school diploma or GED. That's the ed, and then 1 to 3 years of experience. So it is clearly a support person, not a CISO type. Now, when I was over at the Board of Regents for the university system in Georgia of 35 campuses, my department had 200 analysts and hardware folks that reported to us. And that was the time that a lot of the info security stuff was hitting organizations. And you can imagine a university, but more so a university system. I mean, what do you have to protect? Hey, here's 5,000. Can you put a master's degree in your database for me, and I can get a credential? That happens, people. That happens. And the job for a university system is partly to protect the integrity of every degree that is awarded by a college or university. So you might not think there's a whole lot going on there, but there's a lot. And there was a struggle to get a chief data officer and then morphed into a vice president for security. Fortunately, they did go down that road because the systems are massive. So Bill's giving us some golden thoughts here about in the U.S., our association here. Don't look the other way, guys, across the pond, because it could be the RSGB next. So, Bill, thank you for those observations.
That was my concern as well. This could just be a random ransomware actor just trying to get some Bitcoins out of people. Or this could be targeted, which you'll know if you see some other organizations getting attacked. One thing Frank brought up that I really want to elaborate. So visualize with me for a second a triangle, and put confidentiality at the top, integrity at the left side, and availability at the right side. This is a base fundamental for my profession. It's what we call the CIA triad, but it's basically the systems have to be confidential. They have to have integrity, meaning the data can be trusted that's stored in, that wasn't modified inappropriately. And you have to have availability. Right off the bat, this is I don't even want to count the days now.
2 weeks, I think.
It's over 2 weeks, and they're still down. So their availability is out the window. The other 2 variables that we need to learn more information on is the confidentiality, which they kind of said that their information's public somewhat. I mean, there's a lot of PKI infrastructure they run with Logbook of the World. That's not publicly available. That's confidential. And they implied in the one notification that the database integrity is okay. So that means that no one went in there and modified stuff. We think, like I said, I could be jumping 10 steps ahead of what's actually going on at this point. But that's the lens I view it from. And exactly what Frank said is that's your base level for any IT system. Confidentiality, integrity, availability.
Bill, I think that was, I don't know, maybe the PR part of it saying, oh, this is publicly info. People thinking about the FCC license record. In the U.S., it's public info. That's my guess, that they were saying, oh, that's public info. You can bet your darn bottom dollar that the ARRL member record is not public, because I've had to go way up the ladder just to get birth dates to attach to things to do some of the research for the ARRL. So anyway, your point's certainly well taken.
That's, like I said, I think the notifications have a lot to do with the Connecticut state notification requirements, which implies a cyber attack.
Well, all we can do, guys, is wait and see what comes out of this one. But hopefully, what the guys have told you about this will be of interest to you. Move to our next news story. The RSGB Strategic Priorities Update. Now, like all organisations, they have priorities of what they're working on. I'm looking at this: growth of amateur radio, membership with the RSGB, spectrum and licensing, and continual financial stability of the society. I would suggest they are very, very difficult at this moment in time to do those, and they should have been either looked at or going forward. Now, it's an update, so it doesn't mean there's anything new in this. It's just giving us an update. But I think all these things for the update are going to be more and more difficult as time goes on. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I don't think there's anything particularly new here, is there? I mean, growth of amateur radio, surely that's got to be a huge priority for every national organisation, every national society. Membership of that society goes alongside that. They also want to grow the membership. We know that portion of people that are members of the National Society compared to the whole population of amateur radio operators is actually reasonably low. And I think we've seen in certain parts of the world it actually go down. Spectrum and licensing, we know, is a very key part of what they all do. It's about protecting our spectrum and perhaps increasing our spectrum. And alongside that, licensing is what makes sure that the right people have access to that. And I think alongside all of this thing, the continued financial stability of the society. So the RSGB has to make sure that they have a future, which really goes back to the membership growing, and that goes back to a general growth amateur radio operator. So I don't think there's anything particularly groundbreaking here. I think it's trying to continue the hobby and trying to make sure the RSGB's got a stable future. So I guess that they need to focus on these things, but I think this is all fairly straightforward, and not saying it's easy, but I'm saying certainly setting those as priorities are clearly, make a lot of sense, I suppose.
Yeah. I don't know, Chris. I've looked at this. I think that, and it's not just the RSGB, big organisations are like tanker ships. They're difficult to turn round, and I think they've got to start looking at life isn't the same as it was 50 years ago. Martin, what's your thoughts?
I'm going to be controversial on this, and my views on the RSGB and what I call them. I won't go into that here, but I read this and strategic priorities update. Geez, that sounds like a buzzword of box ticking exercise to amuse the media. Growth of amateur radio. Great. What are you doing about it? More to the point, what have you been doing and what are the results? Let's hear some more about that. Membership of the RSGB. I cancelled my membership. Best cost saving I did last year. I don't feel I was getting any value for money, so I cancelled it. Spectrum and licensing. It's an Ofcom issue. Why are you getting involved with that? Or if you are, what are you doing? Continued financial stability of the society. your money comes from your members. I know there are books and stuff, but priority should be with your members. Start answering to them. And there's a comment on the bottom here that said, I would welcome input from members on our strategic direction. And I'm always happy to discuss ideas. Here's an idea. The funny noise your phone makes occasionally stops when you pick it up and say hello.
Well, I was expecting you to go a bit ballistic. That's your feelings.
I have no time for the RSGB at all. Next.
All right. That is your opinion. You're entitled to it. And I won't cut it. Frank, some of these things like growth of amateur radio and membership, I mean, we're no longer in the baby boomers. People don't have children till they're 30, 35. They may be having 2 instead of 5 or 6. You know, in the first world countries, populations are declining, aren't they? So would you not say that the RSGB and the ARRL and probably the WIA are all in this same problem?
I would agree with that. Let me approach this. This is part of a body of knowledge, I guess you might say, of strategic planning. And being in higher education for years and having done a lot of contract research with K-12 schools on policy, and I was very involved in what was called the education reform era of the 1980s, and several $100,000, which was real money then, for grants and contracts. So every organization like the RSGB, ARRL, WIA, you take any of them around the world that are large by order of membership, you have to think some around your mission statement. And people go, that's just fiddly, and you just put some words in there. Well, if you don't use it for anything, sure. But that mission statement, and I'm sure Bill is probably more familiar with this than he'd like to be, because he probably gets called on for one thing or another. Who are we? What do we do? And very often there are severe fistfights in the kitchen, to use a metaphor, to get a particular thing in the mission statement. Because then if a group in that larger group says we want to go to the left, and it's in our mission statement, so we have to have money to do that. So you see how that falls out. Now Martin Rothwell has become disaffected with RSGB. He is not alone. The ARRL, won't even open that Pandora's box. There are many disaffected. They don't see they get a return for what they would pay as members. And that's the way it is. But if you don't have a mission statement, and therefore from the mission statement identify priorities tend to be things that you focus on where you are lacking with regard to your overall mission statement. And they've outlined, Martin, you touched on the first one, the growth of amateur radio and the corollary membership, spectrum and licensing, and the defense thereof, and ensuring the financial stability of a society. All right, so that's what they've picked out. First world countries, certainly what we called those who are very industrialized countries, those who are in the top economies of the world. What's happened? Well, we're having declining birth rates. Now, little college theory here. We have a fertility rate, which is the result of people getting busy, to use what my students would say. And then not all fertility becomes a birth. Why? We have babies that die before they're born. We have babies who die in their first year. And so little thing you got to keep in mind there. In some areas, health is not very good. More children die during childbirth or during the neonatal period, and so on. But your point's well taken, Martin. We have a declining birth rate. As women have entered the labor market and have moved into professional career and roles, that has become much more of an agenda for people who partner, whether they're formally married or not, whether they are men and women or not, quite frankly. Because we have in vitro fertilization and some other ways that same-sex partners can procreate. So when you get into that, the growth of amateur radio should be a priority. And as a demographer, I would certainly speak for that. Here's where we get a real schism. And Martin Rothwell's a real good case in point. Martin, as we all know here, when Martin likes something, he's got a lot of energy toward it. When he doesn't like something, he's got a lot of energy toward something else. And clearly he has passed on RSGB, and I'm sure with good reason. But that difference between the growth of licensed hams and membership in that organization is a critical thing. Over here in the States, our fellow presenter, Dan Romanchik, has argued that the ARRL should have a goal of a minimum percent of licenses as their target. 20% is what he's advocated, as I recall. Well, you've got the CEO over here trying to dumb down, and this is in his QST column, dumb down. Well, most of those aren't active, and we don't really deal with those that aren't active. Who the hell knows what active is? No one's ever defined it, but it's some little thing out there in the sky. You can use that. So, as David Minster says, we only think that, we know that if you're a member of the ARRL, that you're much more likely to be active. And we think, and we know, tell us how you know, friend. That's being transparent. That there's only about 250,000 active hams in the U.S., and we think we can reach all those. There's the kind of thing that Martin Rothwell is the reason he's jaded and no longer a member of RSGB. And it's clearly a reason why a lot of people in the U.S. are not members of ARRL. It's that schism, what you're doing. And the real gotcha with these things, both the ARRL plays on this every day. If it weren't for us, we wouldn't have any ham bands because they'd sell it all to industrial users. Maybe. How did we get started? That was the same logic then. When the Navy allowed us to get started here in the U.S., where did they put us? Let's put them 200 meters and down. Nobody can do anything with that. So this whole issue over defending the spectrum and licensing is an important thing. Transparency is also important with that. The financial stability of RSGB, I don't know what their financials look like. I can't really comment on that. It's a shame that Leslie's not here because he certainly had direct access at one point and is very knowledgeable about financial matters. So, Martin, what I come to these things as being is assessing where you are and where you want to be. I'm a member of RSGB, and as a member, I've not been able to see any data that says, how are you going to benchmark and how are you going to measure your growth or decline in these areas? And so my comment, the punchline is, put some data collection systems in place so you can measure and monitor where you are.
Yeah, you're right, Frank. It'd be nice to see some figures on that. Well, before I have my last little bit on this, I'm going to ask Bill what his thoughts are.
So I almost want to ask Martin what he feels about digital radio. The DAB.
Next.
Yeah. I want to read this. I want to read this to Frank because I do know this stuff from the back of my hand. I'm gonna redact the name of the university that I work at and our location.
Okay.
But I guarantee this is almost identical to what you had at Georgia. Our hardworking and determined students are at the heart of everything we do. The university leverages the power of the 3 legacy universities to provide affordable, high-quality education, emphasizing high-impact practices, personal and career connections, and inclusivity, supporting all learners to succeed in our region and beyond. I bet you that's real close, Frank.
Well, it is, and here's what tends to happen, and you may see this. From a system level, you get those things propagated out there. Then the university level, you get those propagated out there. And then you tell each department, okay, measure and show how you're doing.
Yes.
And how in the hell do you measure that stuff? I mean, without resources.
Well, that's what I was getting at. So when Martin sent this out, I read the blog post from the RSGB, and I actually liked it. I feel that if you say things that you're going to try to do strategically and you make any effort towards it, eventually you're going to get forward here a little bit. So, I mean, Martin's right. Growth amateur radio, they can influence that by getting more people licenses, period. I'm not sure if that's a primary thing the RSGB is doing. Spectrum and licensing, they can advocate appropriately with the regulator. And that's a pretty easy thing to show, I think. They could say, we took this to the regulator, they implemented it after, a comment period, and look what we did. And I agree with Martin on the financial stability is, your membership, you got to keep your membership. You got to keep them happy and engaged. And you got to show value. I get that. So I roll back to the second key strategic priority, membership of the RSGB. Does anyone know how many licensed amateurs there are in the United Kingdom and how many are RSGB members?
That I've never got a definitive answer on.
Bill, I may have a blog post on that with some release a couple of years ago, but off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah, because I think that is, to be able to show that, you need a benchmark. You need where you're at today, where your potential pool could be, and then you could show growth or decline. So that's one of the things that the ARRL is doing. And I agree completely with Dan, KB6NU, that they should make a goal, which a goal will be based on a strategic priority of getting, for instance, 25% of the licensed amateurs as members. I mean, so if we don't know the number to start with, and we don't know how far they are in the potential pool, it's really hard to define goals that are going to support the strategic priority. It's hard to count when you don't have a number to start with.
The ARRL doesn't put numbers out very readily. Now they put them in their annual report, except one year they didn't. So I asked them, and at my website foxmikehotel.com in 2022, I added some graphs of some data that I got, and W6LG Jim Heath had spurred me on to do this. And the title of my social circuits column is ARRL market share. Elvis has left the building. Elvis here is Dave Sumner, because for whatever reason, the year he retired, I'm not saying he caused it. I'm just saying it corresponds with the peak number since 2000. It was a little over 170. And when you look at then the share of FCC licenses awarded, because we've had a lot of growth, right? And you look at the share back in 2001, we were up 23.5% market share, if you look at it that way. When Dave Sumner retired about 2015, it, as Bob Dylan so eloquently said, it dropped like a stone down to about 20%. I need to update this, and I think I've got the data. So ARRL hasn't done this. I provided it for them. Of course, they ignore it, and that's their choice. But Bill, you are so spot on. Let me give a kudo, if I may be so bold, as some listeners know and people in podcasts know. I've been working as a volunteer with the Radio Amateurs of Canada. I did a survey with them last year, and it was totally for their regulator to look at how they do call signs. And they did a national survey. It was decently done. And we did a report. I wrote a report for them that they presented and met with their regulator. And they have a very positive relationship with their regulator because they helped solve the problem of amateur radio for the regulator. And never be confused. You ain't top drawer when you walk in your regulator. You are more of a nuisance because you're not that important to them, and you're not that important to the FCC. So my point in all, they built right on, as we used to say in the 60s, right on, because you've hit the nail on the head, that until you have them, but what the ARRL likes to do, and I'm afraid the RSGB tends to lean in this direction. Trust us, we know what we're doing. We know the numbers. Don't you worry your pretty little head. We'll tell you. what we're doing. And that's just
Yeah.
so not transparent. Anyway, I'll ring off with that. Bill, you hit a home run on that one, my friend.
Yeah, and just to finalize the growth of amateur radio. I mean, I'm deeply worried about that because I want people to talk to in 20 or 30 years. And like I repost this every time. Oh, now I'm blanking on the gentleman's first name. JH3XCU. He's in Yokohama. He reposts the numbers every month on Twitter for how many licensed Japanese amateur radio operators are. We're down to 356,000.
Yeah, it used to be a couple of million, right?
Yeah. When I was there in 1992, I was told by the other amateur radio operators I was hanging out with in the Shigaraki area, oh, there's 1.2 million hams here. Amateur is the best place in the world to have your license. And and they lost that many. And there's a lot of combining factors. You know, Frank was talking briefly about demographics, and you know, I want to focus. I'm in education. I want to focus on education. We have taught multiple generations of students on, you know, how to do proper family planning, and it's working. The problem is our demographic numbers are going down because of it. I mean, education works. Now we need to educate everybody on what a great hobby this is and get them into the pipeline. One last thing is, somebody said, you know, I can't remember if it was Frank or Chris about, you know, active and non-active amateur radio operators. And I remember multiple statements being made by various folks I knew in the ARRL about they wanted a CEO who was an active amateur radio operator, which is good. You know, I'm snooping on Club Log to see his last upload. He's pretty big right now on 6 meter FT8, but being active on the air doesn't encompass everything the hobby can do. I have a friend who all he does is model airplanes and model helicopters. Guess what? He has a ham radio license so that he can get long range. He can run video. He can control the airplane remotely with higher power. There is so much to our hobby as an umbrella that just thinking that you get on HF and do some FT8 contacts, which I'm guilty of, by the way, is being active is not a true picture of the diversity and just amazing opportunities our hobby has to offer. And I'll just stop with that, because as the RSGB put out some strategic priorities, I hope that they look at what goals they build towards it and keep that in mind so that they can get some more growth in the amateur radio and get more members.
Well, I very interesting comments from all of you on that. Now, I'm going to say something, and this is from the heart. I've met the current president, John McCutcheon from Northern Ireland. One of the most positive guys I've met for a long time. I've never seen him with his chain of office round his neck, because he doesn't walk around wearing a chain of office. He's a very, very positive guy. His only problem, in my opinion, is, like all of us, he's getting older. But sorry, John, I had to say it. You're my sort of age, so, you know, we are getting older. But John's a very, very positive guy, and I think really great for the hobby. Bear with me, guys. Mr. Stuart Bryant, who's the chairman of the board, was the president for a couple of years, positive about what he's trying to achieve, and they are trying to achieve. Steve Thomas, the general manager, really, really positive about what he's trying to do and achieve. And I've met a number of the local reps. Some of them are very, very, very positive. Others, like in all organisations, are not so much. But the people at the top are very, very positive of trying to do things. I think where the problem's going to lie is when you've got positive people that are driving forward and others that, you can't be dictatorial. The chairman of the board can only go forward if the board agrees. He can't override everybody and say, you're all wrong, guys, this is the way we should go. So I wonder whether there's just too much of people that have just come up through the ranks. And maybe it's part of the thing that Colin wrote, the article Colin wrote about somebody else's problem, and where Colin also talked about the right person for the job. At the moment, the guys at the top, I think, are trying to do the right thing. I also believe that some of the reps I've met are trying to do the right thing. Others, I wouldn't give them house room. But in fairness, they don't get paid. So it's a strange one. And I think this is going to be a long, hard uphill battle. So that's my 2 penneth on it. You've got to get your act together somehow. Maybe they need to do a bit of a culling and thinning out of the number of people so that we get a faster moving organisation. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Right, let's move to our next news story before our listeners fall asleep on this one. SDRplay were talking about the new Spectrum Analyser software update for their new RSP DX R2. But guys, if you've not got a Spectrum Analyzer and you want to sort of have a play with one, they're great devices, but they cost a lot of money. If you've got an SDRplay module, you can run up the Spectrum Analyser software and do a little bit of work and start to understand. So, Martin, what's your thoughts?
I like SDRplays. They're simple, they're cheap. There are various versions of them available, and I think that they've had to change some of the software to bring them up to date with the components or whatever that are available. I have one of the original RSP ones, I think it is, that I still play with fairly regularly. I was trying to work out whether this is Spectrum Analyzer software to support the different hardware, the new hardware, or whether it's software that is being incorporated into the main SDR Uno package. Whichever, I know which way I'd like it to. I'd like it to be sort of better incorporated into the package, because at the moment, my understanding is the last time I played with the software, it was sort of a sort of an add-on thing, and my computer didn't like it very much. My old computer I was running it on. But either way, it's the SDRplay project is great. It's fun. It's affordable, and you're right. Spectrum analyzers cost thousands and thousands of pounds, and the SDRplay costs £100 for the basic one, I think, roughly, and then maybe $250 for the most expensive one, ish. And the software's free. So why? It's really a no-brainer. If you want to go down that route, it's a no-brainer to pick one up and have a play with it.
Yeah, it's certainly a way you can have a look at a Spectrum Analyzer and understand if it's of any use to you. And it's not the be-all and end-all, but it's quite a nice extra thing you can do with a software-defined radio. Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with Martin. If you are at the point where you're starting to think you might need a Spectrum Analyzer and you have an SDRplay or you want to invest in one, I don't think that's a bad idea to start learning with that before you make the investment on the large piece of test equipment that, you use a couple times a year. Different, not the same, but different. I am surprised how much I actually end up using my Nano VNA. I thought I was just going to use it as an SWR tester for when I'm on the back porch working on another antenna. And I use it way more than I ever expected. And that's to the point now where I'm thinking, well, maybe, buying one of the higher end units that have more features might be a good investment. And so I'm recommending the same thing, is if you're thinking you might want to get a Spectrum Analyzer at some point, try this first so you get some experience with it without making the huge investment.
Yeah, and if you don't like it, you've still got a software-defined radio to play with anyway, so good move. Right, Frank, you've used one of these for this, haven't you?
I have, Martin, and the thing about it is Steve Andrews done a great job with it. I actually used it in an article I published in CQ magazine about putting together some bandpass filters and then comparing a commercial versus a kit. And I have at the time I had a Tektronix spectrum analyzer with a tracking generator. I sold that to a friend, and I got a Siglent, which is a really nice one. Also have a tiny SA, but I used the SDRplay Analyzer software with a broadband noise source just to characterize the filters. And unless you're doing some things that are, fairly sophisticated, you may not need the tracking generator as opposed to the broadband noise source, which is like $15 off of eBay, mostly out of China. And there's actually a little Arduino project that Steve has identified on his website at spectrumanalyzer.co.uk that you can build and actually make a tracking generator for the thing. So I agree with the comments made. Try this first, get your feet wet, see how you like it. It makes some very nice graphical representations, and it gives a really good feature set, even comparable to some of the more professional ones. So I think you can't go wrong. You can have an SDR receiver, and you can use it as a spec and when you need to. So just don't forget some attenuator on the front end so you don't blow it out.
Yeah, that's always the big one. On any spectrum analyzer, you got to be careful. You've got to attenuate your signal quite a hell of a lot. All spectrum analyzers are different, and some spectrum analyzers don't like DC on them either. Going into the input. Some do, some you can get away with, some you can't. But it's your mileage, you're going to have to check. But Chris, you managed to get an interview with SDRplay at Dayton, which is coming up later. But it's just another nice tool, isn't it, this spectrum analyzer?
Yeah, so this particular software isn't produced by SDRplay, it's produced by somebody else. But yeah, I did speak to Steve Brightman. Thank you, Steve Andrews, yeah. I did speak to Steve Brightman from SDRplay over in Dayton. He gave me a little update. We spoke to SDRplay a little while ago back at the Dover rally, so that was only a few months ago. I think it's back in March. So I got a little bit of an update from Steve on there's a new device that, as you heard earlier, the RSPDX R2, I think it's called. That's an updated piece of hardware, and the good news is that Steve Andrews' software works with that device as well. So all good. Yeah. So yeah, I spoke to Steve. He gave us a bit of an update, and you'll hear that either this episode or perhaps the next one, depending on where we fit it in.
Yeah, certainly is, Chris, and that was a good one. Right, let's move to our next one. Antenna damage forces WWVB to operate at reduced power. Frank, this is a US story, so I'm going to get you there first on this. How much is this going to affect you guys?
Well, it will depend on the operating practice, I think, for hams. There are some hams that use WWV, any of them, but WWVB, particularly to reference propagation, reference maybe aligning a radio or some other things. So I think to some degree it's going to be, an impact. This shouldn't be shocking, though. Our weather patterns have changed, particularly in recent months, or what we've experienced as expected from previous years in the previous months. And certainly Fort Collins, Colorado has had its share of storms, and we've got more coming. So 90-mile-an-hour winds may have been beyond the engineering point for those antennas, but it's dropped their power, and it's going to take a hit. Fortunately, we've got some other ways we can measure frequencies now with a lot of the technology that, it's something apart from the usual. But if I didn't get WWV at all, it wouldn't change my workbench because I use a GPS discipline oscillator. Now, if the GPSs go down, then I have a problem for referencing. But I think it's a nuisance, Martin, as much as anything. You consider WWV to be rock solid, so when anything departs from that, it's certainly a change. And the NIST website, NIST.gov, they have a really nice picture of the antennas and a really nice write-up about what's going on.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Frank. It's interesting on that one. So, Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with Frank. I'm trying to remember. This is the one at 60 kilohertz, I think. So this would synchronize my wall clock. And I haven't noticed that the wall clock has drifted yet. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. But that's the one I listen to in like 10 megahertz or 25. That's WWV.
Yeah.
So this would be the one that just does the wall clock.
Yeah, it's a one bit per second at 60 hertz. Yeah.
Yeah, I probably should get into the GPS era someday. It's been a while.
Well, Bill, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So that's one option. But as long as it keeps working, why upgrade? Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yes, interesting one. This I'm glad the station's still on the air, but yes, obviously they've had some technical issues there, and thankfully they've managed to at least keep something on the air. But yes, interesting about the people with watches and clocks that rely on this. Hopefully they'll still be able to keep the time, and hopefully they'll get things fixed fairly soon.
Yeah, well, I know you've had some bad weather out in the States, because while I was out there, Chris got an alert on his phone saying there's a a tornado coming through. And when we left, I think it was St. Louis, but you might correct me, Chris, the sirens were going there for about 15 minutes to warn people of potential tornadoes. So weather hasn't been, you guys have been hit quite heavily recently, but yeah, so no wonder antennas get damaged. Martin, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I was reading the story. It's like the antenna's damaged. Reduced power is not going to help you. Think back to your radio training. If your antenna is too long or too short, you have a high SWR. I would say they're probably using a different antenna and probably a different transmitter. Now, thinking of this is used to sync clocks, like the radio control clocks and things that we have, a similar system in the UK with a signal from Rugby or Cumbria or wherever it is now. That does sound expensive because I'm guessing it's very low frequency. How many things rely on this? Now, the one thing that I did think would be, certainly in the UK, that would be dramatically affected. And sorry if I sound a bit weird tonight. I've got the councillor doing no mo may, so my hay fever is crazy at the moment. The things that do really rely on perfectly synced clocks on radio stations for hitting external services on time, not just services that you can poke through the window and say, okay, you're up next, and then you can give them a visual countdown. But when you're taking like a networked news service or a networked programming, that could make some interesting listening if everyone's hitting the jingles and playing things at the wrong time, and then you open the fader and your newsreader's already there because your clocks aren't synced. But either way, I hope they get it fixed fairly soon. It is amazing how much stuff does rely on clocks like this. And I know you can sync clocks and things through the internet, but people tend not to. People, you've got a system, as someone said earlier, if it ain't broke, why bother replacing it? You've got a perfectly functioning system. Run with that. So, yeah, hopefully they get it working soon.
Well, that's an interesting thing. It's just an announcement of the problem. Right, moving to our next story. And Frank, you tell me you did some broadcasting many, many, many moons ago, so you know a little bit about this. But WKHS high school schoolers receive CRO certification. So this is to say they've been on a course to learn things on how to run a radio station. Not amateur radio, but still somebody getting a qualification in some form of radio. What do you think?
Yeah, and gosh, I would have liked it if you just left the mini to 2 instead of 3, but I guess you're being technically accurate. So it was a long time ago. I think I was 20 years old, in fact. And back in the day, before deregulation, as we call it here in the States, if you wanted to light the lamp, i.e. turn the transmitter on, you had to have at least a third class FCC commercial license. And I got one. They weren't terribly hard, but you had to go to Atlanta, Georgia at the time and do that. And I did. I'd helped build a commercial AM daytime station, then WXLX 1060. Now, all that went away during the early part of the 1980s, and you don't have to have such a license. So the Society of Broadcast Engineers came up with a certificate. Because here's the problem. You get a bloke who walks in, hey, I know how to run this stuff. You got a job opening, hire me. Well, what kind of background do they have? What kind of training do they have? So SBE, being the organization that they are, came up with a certification program that is not unlike the original FCC program. It's a little bit different. Things are more modernized today. You've got remote links galore and things like that. So they have this. And what's really cool about it is this particular high school in Kent County in Maryland, Wharton, Maryland, 4 of their students have become certified radio operator certificate holders through the SBE. And they have had a high school station there for some 50 years. WKHS is their call sign. So they have a lab with their own radio station, and many students are doing work there. I'll say this. I also built an FM college station at the time, a mighty 10-watt Gates FM transmitter at Georgia College in Milledgeville, Georgia. And a few years ago, some of the students looked me up and did an interview with me. They wanted to celebrate their 45th anniversary, I think it was. And you think about being involved in something, whether it's high school or college, and almost a half century later, in my case, that thing is still going, and it's bigger, better, and faster. So I'm quite proud of that. So I suspect these 4 students, if they go into broadcasting, that they will look back on their high school years and the ability to actually operate a real radio station, not just going on to a digital recording of practice, as just a very exciting thing. So that's what this is about. I'll turn it over to the rest of the presenters for their observations. But I know from personal experience the thrill of what they're going through, because I went through it with the FCC. But how many minis did you use, Martin? 3 many moons ago.
Well, if I got it wrong, Frank, I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. That's the sad thing. You were very accurate, Martin.
Right. Okay. Mine, you also have worked in the broadcast industry. What do you think about these guys? And I don't know if there's anything of similar qualification in the UK.
I doubt. I mean, technically, I do still work in radio. I just haven't been doing very much recently. I'm still technically employed by them. WKHS, I bet they call it KISS. This is one of these things where things in the States differ from things in the UK. Because in the States, they have big networks, but they also have lots of smaller stations. Whereas in the UK, most of our small stations have been bought out, closed, and the transmitters network from London and are controlled by like 1 of 2 big radio groups. I looked at this like certified radio operator. I don't think there's anything like that exists in the UK, because maybe if you were going for a smaller station back, if you're going for like a community radio station and you can help out with some engineering, maybe an amateur radio license or something like that would probably help you out. I've been involved in a number of community radio stations, and there are multiple amateur radio people on the staff involved in engineering and things like that. And that's actually a requirement, not necessarily to be amateur radio trained, but to have someone available that has good understanding of the transmission equipment. Basically, it sort of suggests that you should have a licensed amateur there, which we typically do. But the certified radio operator, not just engineering, but also other parts of the thing as well. Great. if it's got technical stuff, presentation stuff, programming stuff, I think that's a really good idea. And as long as those stations the still exist that take people on, that will open their arms to people and welcome them into the industry, then it's got to be a great thing to have. I mean, I don't think there are any. If there might be a few, but I don't think there's any like school or university stations here. There might be, but they don't shout about them. But if there was something like this for us, I'm sure it would go down well. But it doesn't exist in the UK, and if they've got it in America, great. Well done to them.
Yeah, certainly sounds good, and any qualification is a good one. On that note, Bill, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree with what's been pretty much said. I just like that anytime there's students making something of a technical, or in this case, it's a certification, it's a test, but they had to get some unusual learning to be able to pass it, other than the standard curriculum. I think those opportunities are always great. So I'm glad that you shared this article.
Yeah. Well, that's good for the students. Chris, last words on this one?
Yeah, I think, I work in the world of IT, and we have similar things, have certifications that, if you're going for a job, you've got to kind of, how do you prove that you actually do know something without, you can tell someone you know something, you ask a few questions maybe, and hopefully give the right answers, but having a certificate that says you've actually done some practical training, some practical exercises, maybe an exam, to prove that you know this stuff is actually always extremely useful for both the applicant for the role and also the person hiring. So I know these are probably these guys at the moment probably aren't in that situation, but certainly for the future, having this under their belt will be very useful. And it's a nice thing to have. It shows that you've kind of you've earned something, haven't you? You've sort of learned something, and you kind of earned something that proves that you've learned something along the way. So I think this is a great idea.
Yeah, well, as I say, not an amateur story, but it was radio and somebody getting a qualification, youngsters learning about technology. So to me, it was worth us running this one. Our last news story, and this one's probably going to be a quick one, but the FCC have requested public comment on the effects of the May 2024 severe geomagnetic storm. Now, I think this is, they're asking members of the public to send in reports and let them know what happened. But in fairness, I would suggest Sci-Fi may be well ahead of them. On this one, Bill, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm sure HamSci is going to have a lot of information to share with them. The first thing I saw when I read this was my mind immediately went to a joke of, oh, where do I file for the class actions lawsuit so I get my $2.71 for not being able to make any contacts for 3 days on HF? But aside from that, it's actually interesting to me that I didn't know we had a Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau as part of the Federal Communications Commission. So that's my new thing I learned today.
Well, as I say, I'm not living in the States, so I didn't understand all of this. But in fairness, I was thinking, well, HamSci knew this was going to happen. I'm surprised that others didn't get ready for it. That was all on that one. So, let's say, Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I don't know much about. I wasn't operating that particular day. I heard people were saying that clinicians are pretty poor on HF, and I suppose I'm not sure what the purpose of this. I'm guessing it's to perhaps learn. They were saying this is the worst geomagnetic storm since 2003, and certainly here in the UK, the Northern Lights or the Aurora were seen by many people. I was asleep. I completely missed it. I remember waking up on Saturday morning, the day after people were seeing these lights in the sky. I completely missed it, and lots of folks were posting on Facebook. Lots of look at last night's sky, and I completely missed it. And the next night, they suggested it might happen again, and I certainly didn't see that night. So that was kind of the positive, I suppose. People were seeing these these lights in the sky, which are quite pretty, I believe. The Northern Lights like a once in a lifetime thing, but certainly for us amateur radio operators, it seemed to provide pretty poor conditions for operating radio, particularly in the sort of HF part of the spectrum. So yeah, I guess the FCC are trying to figure out, well actually, this has happened. What's the impact and what can we learn from it?
Yeah, interesting. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Well, so I'm guessing these are the Northern Lights. I miss them. Emma got a picture of them on her phone. Some of our neighbours got amazing shots. I wish I'd have known about it. I've had my SLR ready to go, and I'd have had the HF antenna up and ready to go, because I would love to hear some Aurora. I've heard recordings and stuff of that on YouTube, and it sort of sounds like this, which is very eerie. But I wasn't operating. I didn't know anything about it. It was the middle of the night for us. I knew that there was things coming because I'd seen things in American groups. Realised it was happening in the UK. The fact that the FCC are asking for information, I think it's great that they're collating info, because it's not something that happens all the time. So the fact they're actually gathering data to better understand things, I think that says a lot for the FCC. I hope they will share, because I would love to see some of the results that they get back, and it'd be probably information that's probably worth something to the likes of Ofcom as well and other regulators worldwide.
Yeah, certainly would be, and that's certainly been an interesting one. Frank, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Yes, I happen to be familiar with the PS part of Homeland simply because I was a chief technical flunky, and that's not an official category, for the RACES officer here in Mississippi. RACES is the government Aries. It's the one who's legitimated by law. And Mike N5DU is a good friend of mine on my portable ops team, was the RACES officer with the Mississippi Emergency Management. And so there are all kinds of communications through that activity. That's the only reason I was aware of it. Here's why it's important to them. It's not as much about voice communications. It's much more about data and utility communications, especially GPS and other timing-based communications. We talked about WWVB and that sort of thing, syncing clocks. Well, if our GPS capability and the related technology that's triggered by GPS goes offline temporarily, then we may have a severe risk. And think about it for a moment. You've got bureaucrats in an agency, and they're not out there everywhere. So, this is a good thing to ask for public comment. Now, HAMSI, which I'm part of, designed an experiment, and there's another eclipse coming up that there's another experiment that they've designed to collect formal scientific data from. But getting this kind of cattle call, if you will, from the public and compiling it, and I'm with the other group, I'd love to see it. Certainly it will be what we call FOIAble, Federal Office of Information Access or Federal Information Request, but they probably will release it anyway at some point. Love to see it on maps, who reported where and what they reported and what time. And I'd love to see them put out some GIS data for the reports. They may not be the most scientific, but this is the underlying motive, because it's really important to see where some of these impacts were perceived to be and in what way for our homeland security. It's not a trivial thing at all.
Well, that sounds very interesting, Frank. And yeah, so just a little one at the end. That one came in, news story came in just as we were about to record. And I thought it was worth running because it's the geomagnetic storm from a different point of view. Right, let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke. Bill, I know I was with you just over a week ago, but what have you been up to radio-wise since we last spoke?
Yeah, we hit the Dayton pretty hard. So basically, Chris and I walked around, did some interviews. You and Colin walked around and did another set of interviews, and Dan floated between both teams. And I actually walked around Dayton, and I got further through the flea market this year than I did the last time 5 years ago. But as we were finishing up on day 2, I found another section of flea market I didn't even go through yet. So I got to make sure when I go back again someday, I check out this other area. But that's just a testament of how much the Dayton Hamvention has grown at this different venue. And I had a really good time the whole time we were there. After I got back, I jumped on the radio. Actually, it was a week after I got back. Did a lot of FT8. And then I figured out earlier this week how to send POTUS spots to Ham Alert to feed a DX cluster connection in my logging software, which in turn feeds my band scope on the Flex. So Sunday was a great example. I must have got half a dozen POTUS stations here on Sunday. And on 20 meters, I heard one W9 ICQ talking to another gentleman as I was spinning by. So I'm sure you'll bring up that adventure. But I'm currently off and unplugged because we had a thunderstorm come through here about an hour and a half ago. So hopefully I'm done with the thunderstorm for the night. We'll have to look at the weather. But yeah, I'm still recovering from Dayton. I did make one online purchase, an item I was looking for at Dayton. The vendors I stopped at did not have it in stock. And I signed up for email notification, and I got it. And I got a coupon from the vendor, which I thought was very nice. So I have a little item on my way, which I'll probably talk about next time once it gets here, and I add it to the soda pack.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good, Bill. And yeah, I'll tell you about W9 ICQ being operating a little bit later. Frank, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke on the?
Well, I've been reasonably busy. I wasn't able to make Dayton this time with the group due to a medical issue here, but I had a wonderful visit from Martin, Chris, and Colin here in Mississippi, and it was a delight to both Beverly and me. And Beverly got to meet 3 of the guys she hears a lot about, and it was just a delightful visit. It took you some time to drive down here from Ohio. Greatly appreciated, and we had a good visit for maybe 4 or 5 hours, and a good meal, and just a jolly good time was had by all. And for our listeners, no surprise, the guys from across the pond owned the wait staff with their British accents. No question about it. So thank you, guys. Yesterday, I had the pleasure, and that we're recording on Wednesday, drop on the following Sunday, so this would have been Tuesday, working with the Jackson Amateur Radio Club. We delivered 2 3D printers totaling about $3,000 to the Madison County Public Library System as part of a donation from the club to the Madison County Library's maker spaces. And so I'll do a press release for the Jackson Amateur Radio Club, and that'll probably get some local media attention. But they were just delighted, and that relationship is going very, very well. A little funny thing happened a couple of days ago. I was at my workbench, and I was getting ready for the ARRL digital contest that's coming up this coming Saturday. By the time listeners hear this, it will either be in the middle of that or over. But I was checking some WSJTX settings using my Xiegu X6100, 10 watt with an external battery on my Microsoft Surface Pro that I take into the field with me. And I have a little tripod camera light portable antenna that I'd mentioned previously I'm working on. And it was just set up in my closed garage behind metal doors next to a wall of wire rack shelves next to my Toyota RAV4. So, I just wanted some kind of load on there really to test that. Now, I actually had it on 20 meters. That tripod alone resonates very well, sitting on top of a Faraday cloth for the counterpoise. So I was just tinkering around, and lo and behold, I accidentally worked AA0DY in Colorado on FT8 inside my closed, a lot of metal garage. So I was using a Faraday cloth, but it was far from a Faraday cage. So I will report that little contact, which was a surprise and a lot of fun. Still doing some tinkering on my workbench. I took delivery of a DMM Check Plus Revision 8 bench standard device. Runs on a 9-volt battery or external power. And that's a significant upgrade to the Revision 6 that I had before. It does voltage and current, and they've got calibrated references there that has a Cal certificate, and you can send it back in, I don't know, for the first year or two for free. You pay the postage, and they recal it for you if you think you need it. Also has calibrated capacitance and resistance standards, and has both DC and AC voltage. It'll do 100 hertz and 10 kilohertz for the particular reference that might vary, such as the capacitance and resistance. So took delivery of that, add another little reference standard to my workbench. Finally, I served as net control operator for what's called the Century Ride with the Jackson Amateur Radio Club here in Ridgeland. It's headquartered just around the corner at Old Trace Park. So I often just take my equipment and walk down there. We had almost 900 riders and only one incident, which was a mark for safety. But because it was on May the 4th, Net Control had a visit from a guy known as Darth Vader. He dropped by and said he thought the Force was with us. So I got a nice selfie with Darth Vader on the 4th. So, Martin, that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, sounds fun. And we thoroughly enjoyed tipping up on you, just over a week ago. And I'm sure your lovely lady, as I've said before, for about the first couple of minutes, she probably wondered, what have I let myself in for with all these nutters talking to you the way we did? But she thoroughly enjoyed herself. So good. Okay. Martin, what have you been up to?
Use the fork, Frank. Use the fork. You know what? Not very much at all. So my antennas are still not connected. I've had to move my equipment. I just haven't had a chance to do anything with them at all. So my radios are all sitting beside me on the desk here. I need to build a little wooden cubby to sort of put them in and route some cables down. But I've got to route a lot of cables down, so it's going to take some time before I'm back on air properly. I have been up on the DMR talk group, known 480 on mornings on the way into work, as well as randomly throughout the day. I have seen some call signs coming up, and apologise if anyone's been calling today. It's Wednesday. I've seen call signs come up, but I've been in meetings all day, so I've not exactly been able to reply. But it's nice to talk to a couple of people, and I had a nice chat with Phil the other day, actually. It was good to chat to him. I haven't spoken to him in ages. Only brief, but it was a nice little catch up. And back on the repeater. Just local chit-chat on the repeater, a few people popping up. So it was nice to chat to some people on there. But other than that, not a lot else, I'm afraid, radio-wise.
Well, at least you've been on the radio, mate. That's good. As I say, Chris will probably tell you in a minute. He worked Phil DMR Mobile in the States. But Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, for once, quite a bit. So we've had our big trip, as you kind of mentioned a minute ago. So there were 5 of us over at the Dayton Hamvention. And then beyond that, we did a bit of a road trip. And it was great to meet up in person with Frank again and to meet Beverly. A wonderful visit to see you guys, and thoroughly enjoyed it. But before we got there, we sort of did you'll hear some interviews, no doubt, on this episode and perhaps some future episodes that we did at the Hamvention. So it was great to speak to people there. Everyone was extremely happy and pleased and very pleasant, I think. So certainly, throughout our 2 weeks in the States, pretty much every person we spoke to was very welcoming and it was really, really pleasant visit. So yeah, things of note, after the Hamvention, we did actually go and meet up with some of the other people that work in the amateur radio social media space. So people, for example, Josh Nass from Ham Radio Cash Course, we had a chat with him. There was Kyle, AA0Z, or 0Z, I think you would say over there, from St. Louis, who's got a big YouTube channel. There was Jason from Ham Radio 2.0, KC5HWB we spoke to. So a few of our peers, shall we say, in the world of amateur radio news, I suppose, and social media. And that was great. And you'll hear lots of interviews, lots of people later on in the episode, no doubt. We were sporting our orange, as people that have met us, you'll see we wear orange shirts. Orange is a bit of a theme of, if you've never seen us or ever listened to us, if you watch some of our YouTube videos, you'll see we wear orange, although we didn't do any videos on this particular occasion. But new edition this time, we actually were taking with us orange Quansheng handheld radios to keep in touch with us. So that was a bit of a talking point. Yeah, like I said, we did a bit of a more than a bit, quite a big road trip around America once Hamvention was over. We visited, once it started in Ohio, we went to Nashville, we went to Missouri, Mississippi to meet Frank. We went to Illinois. We started off at the airport in Cincinnati, so we briefly were in Kentucky, because that's actually in Kentucky rather than Ohio. So a huge road. We actually did a quick check on the mileage on the vehicle. We took it back to the airport in Chicago, and we'd done 2,007 miles over the 12 days we were there. So a lot of driving. A big shout out and a big thank you to Scott McDonald and his wife Sarah. Scott's call sign is KA9P. We went over and met him, and we actually stayed over with him before we flew back, and they were great hosts. And he let us use his station. So I put my American call sign on the air, my call sign N4CTH. And as I think Bill and Martin mentioned earlier, Martin put his call sign on the air as well. Wonderful station he's got there. Managed to work a few stations. I actually managed to work the special event station at the Kennedy Space Center. So that was quite nice to do. So yeah, lots of traveling around America. It was a wonderful experience. We took the final parts of our trip are along Route 66 through Illinois. It will take me all day to go through everything that we saw, but it was a really special time. Spent a lot of time with Martin and Colin on that road trip, and again, just a big thank you to Scott and to Sarah for hosting us up in Chicago there. So yes, Martin, there's a lot more I could say. I did speak to Phil Heckingbottom on VK6ADF on DMR as well on the talk group. I think that was while Colin was driving, because we did share the driving between myself and Colin in the rental car. So a great trip, and yeah, really, really good. So Martin, I'll leave it there, otherwise I'll be talking all night. So back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems. Well, some of our stories will come out, I'm sure, over the next few months. Well, yeah, we did end up going to Dayton, which was great. The day before the Hamvention took off, we went to the museum at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And if you're ever interested in any form of aircraft, you have to go there. It's a really interesting place. And it's free, believe it or not. We've done it twice now, and we've probably only seen half of it. I had 2 full days there. I did walk around and talk to a number of people there. Both amateurs were there and other general people, and had a really great time there. 2 days at Dayton Hamvention, some great interviews. My only concern is that I'm probably going to upset a few people because I didn't get all your names and your bits and pieces. But what I will say is, as I was going through Cincinnati Airport and I'm queuing up to hand my passport over, I had an American couple behind me, and they were asking me what they needed to show the people, and I said, "You're actually in the wrong queue. The American nationals are supposed to go that queue, and the non-Americans are in that queue." And the gentleman behind them said, "I know you. I know your voice. You're Martin from the ICQ podcast." And that was Fadel. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, Fadel M1MRB. And he was also the gentleman that arranged Mrs. B a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit while I was away. So thank you very much for that as well. after the event, we ended up going to a place called the Troll Pub, where a lot of the YouTubers and podcasters met up as a group, and it was great fun. I'm terribly sorry I'm going to miss some of you out, and I don't mean that nastily, because it was just full on. But Josh invited us from Ham Radio Crash Course. Janie, you'll know her as the duck lady, the lady who goes around Hamvention with the ducks. She was there, N1DUC, and I got to meet her ducks. There was a gentleman called Chris who's converted a broadcast fan into an amateur radio unit, done a fantastic job on that, and had a great time with him. And I spoke to the ARRL youth team as well while I was there, and many, many, many other people. And if I've forgotten your name, I apologise, but it was a great evening. Road trip, we went down to see our Frank, no problems at all, enjoyed that. And I'm sure Beverly's probably forgiven me by now. I also tried to operate 2 meters. 2 meters on as many repeaters as I could find on the route, our 2,000-mile route, and I wasn't that successful. I had a few every now and again, but even simplex, it wasn't that good for me. St. Louis was great fun, and I'm going to throw a question out to people. Chris is somebody who doesn't do heights, so he was downstairs at the arch. And the big arch is just 630 meters tall, or feet, 630 feet tall, rather. I went up the arch with Colin. Chris was in the basement, which is underground. At the top of the arch, there are windows. These windows are no more than about 8 inches tall by maybe 2 foot wide, And we had a contact with Chris. Well, I put a call out at the top there, and Chris came back to us. He was below ground. I don't know how the signal propagation worked, whether we had some ducting, whether we had some skin effect, or whatever. And if somebody can explain it to me, I'd be really grateful. But we had a 5 and 9 contact, Chris and I, and Colin joined us as well. So that was good. And then, then we moved up to Chicago, up Route 66 to Chicago, enjoying ourselves. Stayed with Scott McDonald and his lovely wife, Sarah. And Scott let me operate in Chicago with 1 kilowatt, which is unusual for me. And I made a number of contacts. So all in all, great. We then headed back to the airport, caught the plane, and I got home, I suppose, about 3 o'clock Monday afternoon, about 36 hours ago. So all in all, a great time. I know Frank and Bill had hard stops, and they've had to disappear because we have gone very long. So all's left for me to do is to thank Chris. Thank you, Chris, for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, everybody else. It's been the usual fun.
Yeah, and thank Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
It's been fun. I was about to drop as well, I'll be honest with you.
All right. Okay. I'll say 73s and we'll start the rest of the podcast. 73, guys.
Yeah.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BLY. We start with news, and congratulations here that the IARU have new presidents and vice presidents. So the member societies have ratified the nomination of Tim Ellum, VE6 Sierra Hotel, and his secondary call sign G4 Hotel Uniform Alpha. And he's been ratified as president, and Thomas Red, Delta Foxtrot 2 Oscar Oscar, as vice president. And they're going to be holding those offices for a 5-year term, starting from May. So congratulations there. Tim is holding his 4th term as president, and he thanked the member societies for their support and congratulated Thomas on his election, and also offered special heartfelt thanks to Ole Garbsted, Lima Alpha to Romeo, who retired as the vice president. So say good luck to both men on their upcoming term. Now, it's only a few weeks to go for the ARRL Field Day, taking place on the 22nd to the 23rd of June. Lots of activities and clubs getting involved, etc. But the theme for this year is to be active. And as I say, everybody to get on the air. Strong, great operating conditions are hoped with Solar Cycle 25, which is obviously still attracting lots of hope for great contacts, etc. Now, in relation to that, some states are even honouring our community, and the governors in Ohio, Iowa, New Hampshire are among many of the states where the governors have made a formal declaration honouring the community service provided by amateur radio operators in relation to services such as ARRIs and emergency services, etc. So a great chance to get involved. The day is part contest, part emergency communication exercise, part public relations exercise, outreach activity, and probably more importantly, a great social highlight of the year for all our hams. So we'll put lots of information on the ICQ podcast web pages over the next few weeks, and hopefully you'll have great fun getting involved in this. History buffs among you will be aware that we're coming up to the 80th anniversary of the D-Day Normandy landings on the north coast of France. To celebrate this, a Dutch crew of scouts, the Plus Scouts, will be operating a special event station from a D-Day museum on Omaha Beach to celebrate this special event of, the Allied Forces landing. The call sign will be Tango Mike 80 Delta Delta Alpha Yankee, so TM80 D-Day, and they'll have additional information on their QRZ page, which obviously we'll put a link to on the ICQ podcast webpage. Lots of operating frequencies for you here, including DMR as well as upper and lower sideband frequencies, so lots of opportunities to get involved and, as I say, work this special event station for the 80th anniversary of the Allied landings in Normandy. Right, now we head over to our features episode, and our features episode is at the start of our interviews and news, etc. from Dayton Hamvention. So as always, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, I'm at Dayton Hamvention 2024, and I just come across an old friend that I try and catch as many times as I can, and there's some great banter goes between us. I'm with Graham from BHI. Hi Graham.
Hi Martin, how are you?
Well, I'm ducking and diving, but as I say, this morning you were very, very busy here. We caught you now, the rain stopped and people have gone outside. Still busy, but a bit more relaxed now, I'd say.
Yeah, it relaxed a bit. It's quite nice to have a slight change. This year I'm on the DX Engineering booth, and I've got a bespoke piece of demo kit that I've done for them so that customers can literally switch between any of our DSP noise cancelling products and hear, which one that would suit their station. So I'm quite pleased to have this nice little location, as you can see.
Yeah, some interesting stuff you got in front of us, but you're telling me you're always innovating new products, and you've got a nice new product coming out?
Yeah, we've got hold of a pair of wireless Bluetooth headphones that we just recently launched. They're really good. They've got very simple to use, very comfortable on the ears, but they've got a 3.5mm stereo jack, so you're not tired. So, when you're on a plane and you find that the plane more often than not hasn't got the Bluetooth connection and you can't use them, we've got the 3.5mm that you can plug in, so you can still have your noise cancelling headphones working, even though and without the Bluetooth.
Well, that sounds good. Now, I'm pleased that you've got the cable, because I'm probably a lot different to most people. Because if you're listening to music, Bluetooth is great. if you're trying to do editing like I do on the podcast, there's actually a delay. Not with your product. The whole of Bluetooth gives you about half a second delay. Drives me wild. So having the extra cable to plug in, a great idea, Graham.
Yeah, great. I didn't realise that was an issue with the headphones, so I'm pleased that we've got some with the connection between the headphones and the audio. They've got the latest Bluetooth technology, and so they go quite a long distance as opposed to the older type Bluetooth, and they also last quite a long charge. I was on the plane for over 8 hours or so, and there was still life in them after that. And I was watching films and things on the plane, so they are excellent.
Yeah. Now, I'm sorry if I shocked you a little bit with that statement. Very, very, very few people are going to even notice that. It's only when I'm editing massive audio files I spot it, and it's all a Bluetooth. But for 99% of all people, when you're listening to radio with noise cancelling, you're going to be great. And you'll be over the moon with it, because if it's anything like the rest of your products, Graham, it'll be brilliant.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's what you call active noise cancellation. So the idea is, as far as radio goes, is if you're a club station or you're at an event where there's lots of people, then they're ideal, because you'll be able to listen to your weak signal, and the noise cancelling, the active noise reduction will remove some of the background noise, so you can hear better. But really, they are more suitable for a commercial application, travelling on an aeroplane, on a train. So, they're good for both, but mainly for commercial use.
Yeah, but as you say, good for both, because if you're out and, like, you've come here and you were going to assume you were going to operate, say, tonight or after the show, you've got a nice travelling headset and great stuff. So, it's a good one. So, they've only just become available, haven't they? Because I didn't know about them when I first tipped up it.
Yeah, we launched them recently in the UK, and we've got some more stock in, so they are available now. But yeah, they are pretty much new. We've just started doing the PR in the USA here as well, so they've only just arrived here.
Yeah. So, moving on to the show here, have you had some interesting customers wander by?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and what you find about the US customers is they've actually done their homework, quite a lot of them, and they've turned up and they just want to see it in the flesh. They knew I was going to be here, and then letting them sort of see the controls and hear how it really works has sort of sent some of them over the edge, and they've gone and spent money with us, so that's great.
Yeah, well, that's what you want them to do anyway, but yeah, it's great. And it's a nice show, this one. There's a lot of people here, and now it's stopped raining. The halls are not quite as busy because everybody was hiding inside for the rain, but great show, I would say.
Yeah, I love coming here. I like this place better than the Harbour Arena, the old place, but I mean, some people would argue that, but there's a lot more room here. There's a lot better food. You can go out and get the most amazing pork chop in a bun. Seeing is believing when I heard about them. So, there's a number of food wagons out there. I guess it's probably not that healthy, but it's healthier than it was at Dayton Hamvention in the Harbour Arena.
Yeah, I never went there, but we had some fun and had some great fun talking to people around the area. And not only that, I mean, it's great, not only talking to Americans, but Brits that are over here.
Yeah, there's quite a few Brits are over here. The RSGB are here, and quite a few Brits and Europeans make the trip here because it's such a good venue. And it's just a friendly place to be, and everyone has great fun. There's stuff to do in the evening and chew the fat a bit,
Yeah. So, the rest of the year, I assume I won't see you at Friedrichshafen. I assume you're going, but I'll probably catch up with you at the UK National Hamfest. Yeah,
we'll be having our own booth in Friedrichshafen, so if anyone wants to come and see us for a live demo, we'll be there. And yeah, look forward to seeing everyone who's in the UK at Newark. I'm sure it'll be a good one. We haven't had one for a while, so let's see if we can make the most of it.
Oh yeah, it didn't happen last year, but it'll be happening this year, so that's a good one. Graham, thank you very much for your time. It was great as always, and great to see you. What the listeners haven't heard today, and we have a clean rating on this podcast, is Graham and I wind each other up quite well. But always great to see you, Graham.
always like to have a bit of banter with you all, really, but mainly you, Martin. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham.
So we're here again at the Dayton Hamvention 2024. I'm on the Aircraft booth and I'm here with Eric, H6. Sorry.
WA6HHQ.
Thank you, Eric. It's been a long day.
It's been a long day, it certainly has.
So, we've not been to Dayton for 5 years. When we came here 5 years ago, it was the big announcement of the K4. And here we are 5 years later. I can see it's on the stand with a few more additions to the lineup with the K4. So perhaps talk about that first, Eric. Maybe give us a bit of an update.
Okay, I'd be glad to. Yeah, certainly we got delayed a little bit with COVID and part shortages and all that fun stuff. We've been shipping the K4 for several years, though, now. And thousands of them out there. It's been a very successful product for us, and it's been received well by the contesting and the DXing communities, certainly. And just actually had some reports that we didn't quite expect. We knew we'd done a great job on the receive audio on it, and it turned out to be better than we expected. The contesters were commenting that fatigue factor is lower than any other radio they can use. So we've really done a good job on that. I'm really happy with it. And we've also added some new features to it. One before I get on to remote stuff, I know we had talked about that earlier, is we've also done controlled envelope single sideband. I don't know if you saw that in any of our press releases, but we implemented an algorithm that was developed by a fellow named Gary Hirschberger. I think it's K9AY, if I remember correctly, and published in QEX a while back. And he's a professional in the more broadcast industry radio designer. But he obviously active hand with lots of ideas. Just no source code or anything. We had to figure that out on our own. But we looked carefully at it and figured it out. And basically this takes care of in RF speech compression. It's a challenge to get the max amount from clipping, what they call RF clipping speech compression, because if you clip RF, it's going to go through a crystal filter or some kind of filter afterwards to keep it from splattering on the band, right? To get your average power up, get more average power in general, so people can hear you better. The problem there is that when you put into a filter, a narrow filter, a clipped waveform, it's going to make the filter ring and overshoot. On most radios where the radio has internal automatic level control ALC, if something overdrives the power amplifier transistors, they're going to cut the drive back. Well, what happens when you're overshooting on RF clipping is, guess what? The radio fights you and cuts back total power. So you don't get the full possible amount of average power boost because it's cut it down a bit. Well, the nice thing with CESSB, and we're doing it through a DSP, you've got a chance to sort of look ahead. You can see where you're going to have a piece of overshoot, and there's a way to, I won't go into detail on the algorithm, but basically we can have minimal overshoot. And actually, I think his algorithm got it down from like a 30% or 50% overshoot down to like 3% overshoot. And then we made some tweaks to get it to almost 0% overshoot. So
really getting that performance, the best performance you possibly can.
So instead of getting, say, I don't know, maybe a typical RF speech compression is getting you 3 dB of improvement, just not to be sniffed at. That's twice your power, average power. So you sound louder on voice. It's pretty much single sideband we're talking about, or AM if you want it, but single sideband mostly. In the case of CESSB, and this is ARRL measured numbers, and we measured something similar in the lab, is you run between 6 and 8 dB improvement, and the distortion's lower. We did some neat little tricks to keep that down. So when you have it on, if you turn RF compression up, it can get sort of gnarly and harsh. If you turn it up too far at the far end, you turn it up in the far end on CESSB, you can tell there's compression, but it doesn't sound horrible. In other words, we were able to get rid of some of that harshness out of it also.
That's impressive.
So that, you imagine if you're a contester and it's like getting a free amplifier, on top of your amplifier. Or if you're a person running 100 watts or QRP, you've now got 4 times or more improvement.
Essentially getting more from what you
4 to 8 times improvement in power level, average power, which is what people are going to hear. And they also get good audio reports. So that is in every K4. And that, of course, is a big deal. And I don't know of any radios, main commercial radios, that are doing that. So that's been a big help. So compression advertisement there, but basically that was been a major improvement. So we can do those kinds of things ongoing with the radio to keep improving it with free software updates, things like that.
So Eric, looking on the stand, I can see you've obviously got the K4. You've also got like an app on a tablet. You've got remote control. Seems to be a big feature now of the K4. Yes. Perhaps talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, the tablet actually is a Windows Surface tablet, so it's running Windows. We've developed some software to remote control the K4 with full pan adapter to display, full streaming audio, pretty much full control. We actually have the same Panabacter window that's on the actual radio screen on the laptop or tablet or desktop Windows system. So it's not particular to a tablet. But in addition, outside vendor out of Germany, Marcus, a number of people are familiar with, is developing some work for iOS and for Mac. And he's already got the internals working and is bringing up the user interface right now. So you'll see him selling that soon, which will be nice. The basic goal is to give you full compatibility, control of a K4, remote K4 over the internet from your Windows-based system, whatever you're using. So I can take that tablet with me into a hotel, go onto the hotel Wi-Fi, and can bring up my system and listen to what's going on in the band or talk to somebody on sideband. And so that's that most common one, and we'll be selling that probably for like one of the Microsoft distribution stores for software. And I haven't set the final price for it yet, but it'll be in the low hundreds and stuff in that area, $150, $200, something like that. We also have for that we have a K-Pod that we've had for the K4 and K3 for some time. It's a USB tuning knob and function keys. We're doing a new version of that called the V-Pod for the software, which is called Virtual K4, VK4, not made in Australia, but it is a virtual K-Pod that has a built-in CW keyer in it. You plug your paddle into it. It talks over one USB cable, and it provides local side tone. You put your headphones and mic into it, and you get the side tone pitch, and everything matching what the radio's tuned to, and you get local side tone. It's not delayed through an internet connection delay, because you can't send CW very well when the side tone is delayed.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like listening to yourself tape delayed on a tape recorder, and you can't talk. But that is coming out also in the fall, hopefully time. But both of those sometimes in the could be early fall, mid fall, late fall, before the end of the year in any case. Those will all be out there going through final test and everything. And then on top of that, we have a K40. So those usually had K3s. We had K30. It's basically a control panel for the K4. And the K40 has the complete exact same front panel as the K4. So it's a graphic panel with pan adapter, soft buttons, all that is on there. And then all the same front panel buttons. If you're not looking carefully, the fact that it's only 4 inches deep, it looks like a K4 and operates seamlessly. You can't even tell you're not operating locally with it. So that will be out also in the same time frame, late summer or fall time frame. I'm trying to push that as hard as possible because I'm getting a lot of pressure now that we've released the next thing, which is software that's already out there for K4 to K4 control. So any K4 owner can use another K4 to control his station or her station, and also friends can also use your station. So whoever has the bigger antenna, hey, let's get on and work DX together. And you can have up to 4 people connected at once, in addition to the person locally using it. That's also useful for contests. You can have 2 operator, 1 radio contest operation. So K40 is basically designed as a portable K4 front panel. Like I said, 4 inches deep. It has the same level of I/O on the back, so you can plug in a USB-B connector to go to your laptop or your desktop computer for logging or anything else you want to have it. And it has built-in sound card, built-in virtual COM ports on USB. That's a one-cable solution for digital modes, and that will basically take care of being able to operate your station just like a real station with a less expensive version. I haven't set the price level for that yet, but it'll certainly be way less than a K4. So
cool. So look, Eric, the other thing that we've noticed on the stand today is a brand new radio, the KH1. Well, brand new to us at least.
It's going from the other extreme, from the top-end radio in terms of large radio to small radio.
And I've been blown away by just how small this radio is and just how feature-packed it is. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the KH1.
Well, the KH1 stands for handheld radio. And the initial idea from Wayne, my business partner, was he wanted to have something, well, he likes to hike a lot. He goes in for daily walks and everything else. And he wanted a portable radio, sort of like a walkie-talkie, Morse code, because in QRP, if you're running low power, that's the best way to get effective communications, obviously, with a narrow bandwidth. And this is a handheld radio. That's microprocessor control, little digital display, memories and keyer memories and a few other good things like that. That puts out 5 watts or so, close to 5 watts off a internal 3-cell lithium-ion battery. It's the size of a pack of cigarettes, roughly, for those of you who remember what a pack of cigarettes looks like.
Yes.
And it has a built-in optional paddle that plugs into the bottom of it. That's very nice, and it's portable. You can actually hold it in your hand with the radio in one hand and use the paddle in the other hand and send Morse code with a built-in keyer. covers from, currently covers from 40, 30, 20, and 15 meters. 40, you probably want to run an external wire for that. You probably could put an extra loading coil on the whip, but we also have both the ability to drive an internal whip on the radio. We have an internal auto tuner option for it too. And that will tune that whip pretty much from 15 meters down, easily from 15 meters down through 20 meters. For 40 meters, you can still use the auto tuner, but we have a separate BNC output for any of those frequencies that you can throw a long wire over a tree if you're at a park bench or whatever you want to operate. So you've got a very flexible radio, and it's all in one hand, low current drain. You can operate all day on that.
And it's tiny. And
it is tiny.
We were chatting to Wayne a few moments ago, and he was sort of demonstrating it, and it's got the built-in. It's even got a built-in notepad for making for your log.
Yep.
It's all been very, very, very well thought out.
We have it. Yeah, we use 3D printing quite a bit on this. 3D printing, by the way, is graduated from prototype-only work to very high-quality volume work. And we use it for a number of things. Actually, on the K40, my fold-out feet on the K40, if you look at those, you'll never guess that those are 3D printed. It's a nylon mix of a plastic. It's not brittle. It's very forgiving, in terms of flex and stuff. But it's professionally made, and we can get it turned fast, no molds or anything like that to mold the plastic.
Yes, so of course, there's things that take so long to make.
It's a lot of time and money, yeah. So we can immediately turn on. What we'll use on the KH1, the top and bottom covers. You hold the radio. The front is facing you, sort of like the front of that pack of cigarettes. But on the bottom, you have the plug-in paddle, iambic paddle, and frequency and volume controls, and ability to control menu selections and so on inside the radio. And on the very end, there's a cap there, which is a 3D printed bottom. The very top, the black cap on that has the BNC connector, the ground lug or ground stud where you can tighten it down. The whip. There's actually a switch that switches in a loading coil for different bands, and then of course the internal auto tuner takes care of the rest. And then we have the cover that closes on top of the radio, which also has room for logbook pages with a little tiny bullet pen that you can fill it out. And you can move it from left to right. So I'm left-handed, so I can hold it in my right hand and so on and right, and it works very well. All those are 3D printed, have that same material I was just referencing, and we've got it down to a system now where we're very familiar with how that acts and how to get the tolerances where we want them, and it works wonderfully. So that gives you an incredibly compact, easy to use. You can use external power on it. There's a built-in battery charger option. You can supply 11 or 10 through 14 volts, 15 volts to it to operate it externally. If you have the internal battery and you have a backup one in your pocket, it's the same size we use in the KX2, by the way, a 3-cell lithium-ion. And that will plug in the outside too. So you get and it takes the one that's the higher voltage, so they're isolated by diodes, so that'll take care of that. So amazing little radio. I mean, I have a lot of fun just operating with that.
So obviously this is available in the States already, and when we're selling us, we've already sold quite a number of units, but I haven't seen this in Europe yet, so what's the plan for?
Well, we're planning on bringing over to Europe at this moment a kit version of it, mechanical assembly, and we can bring those in without any special certifications because they're amateur built for yourself. So you'll see those over. They're very simple to build, so it's not tough. And we pre-test the boards, so functionally they're all working. So you'll see that starting to show up in the next couple of months. Actually, I may have some with us at Friedrichshafen even. We have a booth there this year with our Swiss distributor Lutz, and so I'll be there showing off all the toys and doing that. But we had such a backlog when we introduced it in the States, and we actually are catching up with that quite rapidly. We're still shipping about 3 months behind, but it's certainly better than 6 months or a year or something crazy like that. So, and that's accelerating. We've got hundreds of these things coming in all the time and getting them out the door. And it's a regular production line and stuff. We've got all the material. We're able to get it. We haven't had any major hiccups in the supply chain, so you'll see those out there. And a few have snuck over to Europe because they'll pick them up over here. And they'll show up in their luggage, and that's small enough no one pays any attention to.
And I guess the kit option then gets around the certification, because that takes a long time and expense, I guess, to get the certification to sell it as a complete unit.
Yep.
Eric, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
Well, Chris, actually, it's good to see you guys here. I'm glad. And I'm sure we'll see you again at Friedrichshafen or some of the other shows. And hope to get over to the UK myself also sometime soon.
Awesome, great. And if anyone wants any more information on Elecraft, where's the best place to go?
Best place to go is elecraft.com, like Elegant Craft, ELECRAFT.com. And we have product information, obviously, there. There's YouTube videos, including one showing how to assemble and do other options or add upgrades to radios, things like that. We've got links to our social network stuff, the email reflector for Elecraft and some other ones that are put on by other people. And you can find out almost anything you want there. And of course, you can order there, too. And that's available in both full computer screen size or telephone size formats.
Great. That's great. Eric, thank you very much. All the best, and I think you deserve a good rest today after a very long day on the booth here at Dayton. So thank you very much.
I'm ready for it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, it's Saturday afternoon at Dayton Hamvention. The crowds are starting to clear. I've managed to get Hans Summers to sit down. He's been on his feet all day. The queue's almost out the door for the new product you've announced today, Hans. Great to see you. And take this nicely. You're looking as tired as I've often seen you, because Hans works very hard at these rallies. But how are you doing?
Thanks, Martin. It's great to see you too. As always, lights up my day when I see you. And yes, very, very tired. I've had 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours sleep every night this week. So it's hectic as always. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I should say is when I saw Hans yesterday, there was hundreds of people around him, and I hollered across him, "Oh, they let anybody light in here, won't they?" And he said something else to me, which is probably not repeatable.
True. I can't remember what I said. It's been a long day.
Yeah. But we have a great relationship. Now, Hans, you've got a new product here. I wonder if you can tell us about it and what's made it interesting. Now, I've just seen you sell to a gentleman. I probably sat in the back and said too many things I shouldn't have said. But
good things.
They were good things, yeah, because I know of the quality of your product. But tell us about your new radio.
So first I have to mention again last year's radio, because it's related. So last year I launched at Dayton the QMX, which is a 5 or 6 band multi-mode transceiver in a very, very small package. It's about the size of a pack of cards. Draws low current, 5 watt output, very high performance CW and digital modes, and there'll be an SSB modification in the firmware hopefully very soon. And so that's a very nice little package. It's very, very dense inside, and it's very hard to make any modifications to that. We added a version for SOTA and POTA, which is a 60 to 15 meter version, so we now have 3 different versions of that. But what I announced on Thursday at FDIM, at the end of my talk, which was entirely unrelated, I was talking about junk box projects, and I announced the new product I've developed for this year, which is the QMX Plus. So QMX Plus, there were some suggestions on our forum that it would be nice to have a larger format version of QMX in a larger enclosure that had more space for people to make modifications to it. It's very hard to fit anything in that QMX enclosure. It's very, very compact. So I listened to that and developed the QMX Plus. And for anybody who's familiar with our old QCX Plus, the enclosure is basically the same size enclosure, same aluminium profile with a different front and back panel. Other than that, the firmware is identical. The schematic is mostly identical. And the main difference is now we've got a lot of space in the box. We're able to add twice as many low-pass and band-pass filters and increase the band coverage to 11 bands from 160 meter to 6 meter, all inclusive, and all the bands in between. The other changes which I was able to add was a CR2032 coin cell battery backed up real-time clock and an internal GPS module. I also developed a proto board, which is a 0.1 inch matrix board which plugs in on top of the main motherboard and gives you the opportunity to put pin header connections between the motherboard and the proto board and make your own modifications. So you could do things like add a battery, add a loudspeaker, tuner. People talked about a Raspberry Pi and having a remote operated radio with the Raspberry Pi. So it's also, I think, easier to build. The build time is probably around 4 or 5 hours, I would estimate. a lot easier to build because it's more spaced out. There's more toroids to wind, but they're a lot easier to do and install. Things like the diodes and the inductors, they're all orientated the same way. It's a very symmetric layout, so it makes it a lot easier to build. And on the bottom side of the board, in the whole back half, there's no SMD components. So, of course, all the SMD components are pre-mounted, factory-mounted. You only do the connectors and the toroids, capacitors, controls. But on the whole back half of the PCB, where you're going to be doing soldering, there are no SMD components on the bottom side, so you can't damage anything accidentally. So far the interest has been really good, and we brought quite a number of them here, and we've had very strong sales so far.
Yeah, well, that sounds really good. It sounds like a very, very interesting product. Now, when I spoke to, I was speaking to a gentleman you were trying to sell. Well, he wasn't trying to sell it. I mean, he got his money out, and it wasn't a difficult sell because it's a good product.
It usually isn't difficult, yeah.
Yeah. But you say that it's about 4 or 5 hours to build. Now, I'm going to throw another one in here. Guys, if you're anything like me, when you build these things, it's just sometimes nice to just sit down quietly and build it and enjoy the moment of building it. So I've known people rush things and they don't work, and then you spend ages trying to fault find, say, a toroid piece of wire that hasn't got the insulation stripped off it. So it's better to go at your own speed and enjoy the thing. Now, that's what I would say.
Absolutely true, and the thing about the toroid enamel is probably one of the most common faults. But I also have people who come and they say, I'm not a very experienced builder, how do you think I'll do with this? And I've said this before, I probably even said it to you before in an interview. I think if somebody has a relatively low level of experience, it's actually, they have a higher chance of success, because they go through the manual, which is very, very detailed step by step, and they read every line of text and they study the photographs, and they do that 2 or 3 times before following each step. Whereas someone who's a bit more experienced, they get overconfident and they start doing stuff, and then they miss stuff, you know. You see a board, you see a pin header, and you assume you just have to solder that in without reading the instructions. And the instructions said, well, you solder it in, but it's soldered on the back side of the board rather than front, and they've made a mistake. And so I think that as long as you follow the instructions well, you have a really good chance of success. I sent one of the kits a couple of weeks ago to my friend in Germany, Hannes, the L9 SCO, Palm Radio keys. He's already built it successfully, and he's got a YouTube video of the build. So the instructions are good and do work if you follow them properly.
Yeah.
But yeah, you enjoy it. You should enjoy it while you build it. Otherwise, what's the point? What are we here for?
Correct. Now, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit more, but I said to the gentleman who was buying the last pair of radios off you, I said to him, you remember the Heathkit manuals? And he went, yeah, they're really well written. I said, well, Hans's is equally as good, if not better, because you spend time with the documentation. As you said, you highlight what you do. Your documentation is good, and that is often the thing that's missing from other manufacturers.
I really don't understand that. If you don't provide good documentation, you increase your support load and you increase the chances of failure. And what is the point of that? If you want happy customers that come back next time, so many of the customers, they come back and they say, oh, I've built this, I've built that, now I see you've got this, I want to build that. They've had a good experience, so they come back and they buy your new product. Plus, you don't get all the support headache because you've tried to be as detailed as possible and you explain everything, so people don't need to contact you to ask. So I really don't understand people who don't write good manuals, because it's not good for the customers, it's not good for the loyalty, and it's not good for your support headache either. So why do they not write it better? I don't know. I don't get that.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to try and understand, but a great new product, and I'm not going to hold you too long here. I've been trying to get you for 2 days. You've been absolutely rammed. It's gone quiet because we're at the end of the second day and most people are starting to go home. But you've still got a couple of people hanging around waiting to talk to your hands. So I'm going to say...
may still sell a couple more before we go home.
Yeah, do you want me to stand behind them and say, if you don't do it, I'll get you?
You can if you like. You're always welcome.
Yeah, no problem, Sans. Listen, thanks very much for your time. I'm glad it's going well for you at the show. We will catch up with you at another show. I know that you don't always get over to the UK that often, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be in Friedrichshafen this year. But
I'll
great.
probably talk to one of your colleagues in Friedrichshafen, and I am hoping to get over to UK for the GQRP Club Telford convention, which is it at the end of September or the end of October? I think end of September. So I'm hoping to get over for that this year, because it's, I think, the 50th year anniversary of the GQRP Club's founding, so it's an important occasion, and I'm hoping to get over for that.
Yeah, well, I really ought to go, because I'm actually a member of the GQRP Club.
You should, absolutely, yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for your time, Hans.
Thank you very much, Martin. Pleasure to see you.
I'm here with Neil Rapp, WB9 VPG. You're welcome, Neil.
Yeah, as I like to say, the world's toughest call sign to copy or pronounce.
Now, Neil, I know you've been involved with amateur radio for many, many years. I think you were the world's youngest ham.
Yes, I was the youngest ham. I was 5 years old at the time. There's been a few younger since, but I had the call for a long time. So yeah.
And if you look in the video, there's a video with a cat somewhere. We won't talk about the cat.
Oh yeah, they'll talk. Yeah, the cat was not harmed in the video. So if you've seen the cat video, yeah. But the cat was sending some CW that day, and
absolutely.
Yeah. I got a little crazy with the cat.
Now I know you do an awful lot for amateur radio, involved in lots and lots of things. I know you used to do the podcast as well. But you were obviously at the moment you are the camp director for YOTA. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that.
So actually, I was doing the Ham Talk Live podcast, which I've put to rest for a while, maybe permanently. We'll see. But I was on the show and I was interviewing a couple of friends of mine. Sterling Mann, N0SSC, and Sam Rose, KC2LRC, and Yasmi had sponsored them to go to Austria to the youngsters on the air camp over there and steal everything they could steal. They had really been pushing for us to start something similar over here. And so the invitation was there, and so they went, and that's what they did. They observed everything they could and wrote up a big report when they got back and tried to kind of sell it, to people, and they kept hitting some roadblocks. And after a couple of attempts, I happened to have them on the show, and it was brought up that there was this idea of, having summer camps for young people to help keep our ham radio operators that are young in the hobby. And it just kind of resonated with me because, I was 5 years old when I started. I knew a lot of the struggles that young hams have, like I would be on CW and I would send age 5, and they're like, 55? No, 5. And then a lot of times they disappeared, and they didn't finish the QSO because they figured it was somebody just messing with them. And and so there were always the lids that would come along and make fun of a kid being on the air and that kind of thing. So I really understood some of the challenges. And so when I became a high school chemistry teacher, and now at the college level, I made it a point to have a ham radio club at the school, and we became very competitive in some of the contests and some of the on-air events, and we really kind of came to the forefront. Not that we were trying to, but it did. And so we got to, be pretty well known. And so, I'm just sitting there thinking, well, I've been able to run these, high school students through, and a summer camp, you need somebody that has some teaching experience and some background in this and background in that. And you kind of need a little bit of everything. And I was thinking, well, I guess this is probably something I should be doing. And so I made the comment to Sterling and said, well, how would you like for me to be the camp director? And he said, well, let's get together at Dayton and talk about it. Well, before we got here, I already had a proposal lined up, and we started networking with IARU and some of our sponsors, ICOM, YASME, DX Engineering, and looking at ways to see if we can pull this off. And so, I left the weekend. Dave Sumner, K1ZZ, told me, he said, you're not going to have any problems getting this funded. And I can't tell you how many times I had to think back to that moment, because there were some pretty strenuous moments along the way trying to get it to work. But he said, you're not going to have any trouble with this. This is all going to work out. And COVID hit, and so we had that delay. But it did. It finally worked out, and it was a huge success. And so we're getting ready for our fourth regional camp. It's going to be in Halifax, Nova Scotia this year. We're going to Colorado next year. We'll be back in the U.S. for the next 3. But along the way, we are training other groups to do the sub-regional camps. So one of the reasons we're back in Canada for the second year is we're training a group from Radio Amateurs of Canada to start doing sub-regional camps next year. So Canada will have a 3-day weekend camp starting next year. And we're starting our under 15 camp, which will be called Yoda Junior. We're also going to launch that next year. So, and then we're hoping to bring in 4 young people from Argentina, and one of them is going to lead a Yoda group in Argentina. So we're training them. Hopefully they'll be up and running with sub-regionals in the next few years. So we're really making strides. We're slowly but earnestly getting Yoda spread out throughout the Americas now, in addition to Europe. And we work closely with a lot of their leadership over in Europe, but it's gone really well.
I mean, it's a great idea. I mean, obviously trying to get youth into the hobby and trying to, obviously the future of our hobby is getting people to continue doing what we do. So it's fantastic. What sort of things do you kind of do on a camp? What sort of activities do you get the youth to get involved with?
Yeah, so, and let me clarify one thing too, just if people aren't familiar with Yoda. We are more of a retention program than a recruitment program. We have a lot of emphasis put on recruiting new hams and young hams, and we need that. But we haven't really had a group that really focuses in on retention, on giving young people activities to do. So at camp, we will do a lot of activities that typically they're not going to be able to get unless they're in a pretty well-run high school class. We do some balloon launches. We do direction finding. We do an ARRS contact. We do kit building. We do some satellite work. We try to do a lot of those big time things. But the other thing we do is we do have a lot of social time, and we usually take a one day to go out into the community somewhere and kind of learn about the community and sightsee, but give the kids a chance to just socialize. One of the biggest things that we've noticed is that, here at Hamvention, I've got kids everywhere that are hanging out together, and they know each other now because they've been to Yoda Camp, and they know each other's expertises, and so they will ask each other what they're working on, what projects they're trying to do, and they will learn from each other, and that's really the focus of what we're trying to do. So it's not all ham radio activities. Sure, it's cool to launch a balloon to near space and, talk to an astronaut and do satellites and build stuff and learn about that stuff. But it's also really important that we get those social opportunities to build a community of hams within the young people.
And what sort of age range is a YOTA?
So YOTA typically is 15 to 25, and it's not necessarily because of the radio abilities, because like I said, I was 5, but it's a social kind of thing. So that's why we're really pushing to get the under 15 camp going. They'll be accompanied by a parent. But we really want to get that going because we've got a lot of 9 and 10 and 11-year-old hams out there that are very capable operators, and we want to get them networked together too. So we're working on kind of expanding that a little bit, but we focus on 15 to 25 right now.
It sounds very ambitious and it sounds like you've been very successful, certainly over the last few years. And the fact you're growing it into other territories, you're inviting other countries to come along and learn from your experiences. That's a really valuable way of really expanding and getting the message out there. It all sounds very inspirational. They're giving these kids a bunch of things to try out. I mean, our hobby is massive. We all know there's a wide variety of things that we can do in amateur radio, and the fact you give them a bit of an exposure to those things is great. They might find things that they perhaps haven't done before that they suddenly take an interest in, so that's great. And I guess that balance of technical and social is a really important thing, so that's really good. So Neil, if people want more information about YOTA, where's the best place to go?
Youthontheair.org is where you would go for the Americas. That's our website, and we keep track of youth events on a calendar. We have all the youth activities on the air listed out, and all the news about scholarships and anything youth-related, youthontheair.org. In Region 1, you want to go to ham-yota.com. That's the original Youngsters on the Air website, and we link to each other so you can find one from the other. But in Region 1, that's their website, ham-yota.com.
Sure. And here at Dayton, have you had many people coming up to you and asking about the event?
We've had a ton of people come by and ask about it, and we're getting a lot of interest this year. In addition to our Canadian and U.S. participants, we have Argentina will be represented, France will be represented, Malaysia will be represented, Turkey, and South Korea this year. So we're getting the word out slowly but surely.
Fantastic. Neil, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
And wish you the best of luck with the next camp. Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
The ICQ Podcast Digital Voice Talk Group. Your digital home away from home. Worldwide.
I'm on the ARRL stand, Ham Radio Outlet, and I'm here with Steve Brightman from SDRplay. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Chris. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you were over in Newark, weren't you? I think last year we met you, not last year, year before, because it wasn't last year, was it?
I don't know. I get around to all the shows. They all become a big blur.
But I know you're very much the kind of US, one of the guys here in the US for SDRplay. So how has it been today at the show?
It's been great. Had good traffic. It tailed off a little bit this afternoon. I think people are running away to get away from the rain or whatever. But no, we've had a constant stream of interest, and for some reason people seem insatiable when it comes to finding out about SDRs.
Absolutely. Now, we spoke to Andy Carpenter not that long ago over in the Dover Hamfest, and he gave us an update about a couple of things that are new, but I think there's been some new things that have only just been released.
Yeah.
So perhaps you can talk us through those.
Yeah, we got a little bit of hardware and a bit of software. We introduced the RSP1B back in February of this year, which was basically just a hardware redesign of the 1A to avoid any component shortages and stuff like that, although we were able to improve the noise figure in certain ranges. And then just past Friday, we did the same sort of redesign on the RSP-DX, and it's now called the RSP-DX R2. So it's the DX is the one with the 3 inputs, which is really great if you've got more than one antenna.
Yeah.
So
And the one that's also got the BNC, I believe. BNC
it's got a
input.
BNC for up to 200 megahertz and 2 SMAs for the other 2 inputs. So it's a great one to have at home because you've probably got more than one antenna and you want to switch between them, which is really cool. So that's the hardware story, but probably the biggest story following on from Andy seeing you guys in Dover is we just had a new release of SDR Connect, which, for one thing, it includes support for the new RSPDX-R2, but in addition, we've now added a frequency module to the software. So in addition to all the cool ease-of-use features that are in SDR Connect, we now have the ability to store and record frequencies.
Okay.
And this would be analogous to what we called memory banks in SDR Uno. So you have the ability to create multiple different tabs. So you could have one for, say, 20 meters, one for 40 meters, one for VHF, you name it. And you can store all the frequencies in there. And if you were a former user of SDR Uno, you say, well, I've got all these memory banks. What can I do with it? Well, the great news is you can actually import those memory banks directly into SDR Connect. So you are able to preserve all that hard work you'd had making your own sets of memory banks, and they're now available to you in SDR Connect. So
Fantastic.
that came out just this past Friday, and there are a few other fairly minor features. We added a multiplex spectrum for people to look at FM broadcast stations, and you can see where the various carriers are on an FM broadcast signal. And there's also a peak hold functionality built into that, and also the audio spectrum. So a lot of cool incremental features as we continue our progress in adding all the features to SDR Connect that you know and love from SDR Uno. And I know some people are frustrated because it's taking longer than we would hope. Trust me, no one's more frustrated than your friend Andy you saw in Dover, and those of us that are eager to exploit the new features.
And this is the Preview 3 version you're talking about?
This is Preview 3, public preview number 3, or V0.3, whatever you want to call it. V1.0 can't come soon enough for us, but it'll be ready when it's
kind
ready.
Of cautious progress, but it sounds like it's very promising that things are getting added. New features are there. You are getting to a point at some time when this will be as feature rich as SDR Uno is. That's great news. How's the feedback been at the show from customers?
The feedback's been excellent. I think a lot of people, this is their first foray into SDRs, so they haven't necessarily used SDR Uno. But I've had a lot of people say that they downloaded Connect and they really like the simplified interface, the way it's laid out more logically and so on. Some of the SDR Uno people come up, they say, yeah, I've tried it, but I need noise blanking, or I need the scanning functionality, which obviously isn't there yet. So for those guys, the good news is they can run SDR Uno and SDR Connect on the same machine. They could just pick whichever software package they want to use, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. So they've got maximum flexibility there. And like I say, everything's been pretty positive. I don't know if it's because I'm such a cheerful-looking guy and no one wants to say anything negative when I'm here, but haven't had a single negative comment all day.
Wonderful. And, of course, SDR Uno is still supported. I think there are still versions of that coming out. But,
yeah, SDR Uno is in sort of maintenance mode, if you will. It's going to be supported indefinitely. It is the only package we have that supports the original RSP1. Of course, the 1A and now the 1B are supported by Connect. And we're not planning on adding new features to it, but there are still some bugs in there that need quashing, so we will do bug fixes periodically. But obviously our major emphasis right now is on Connect. And I guess one thing about the philosophy of Connect is we will add all the features that were in Uno, but as we add each feature, we will make it better than it was in Uno.
Absolutely.
So, for example, we've got much better notch filtering in Connect than we had in Uno. We've got more flexibility in custom filter widths in the frequency manager in Connect than we had in Uno. So the philosophy is everything we do, we match and then exceed what has gone before.
Wonderful. Steve, before we wrap things up here, is there anything else you want to add? Or
I don't know. I think I probably exceeded my allotted time. I don't think there was anything. Well, of course, the networking capability of Connect is a big thing. And I've been demonstrating here at the show. I've connected to John Hudson's server back in the UK. I've been running 2 servers at my home in Colorado, and all the servers have been flawless throughout.
Yeah, I'm looking here at 2. You've got 2. You obviously can't see this on the audio, but there are 2 demonstration systems here, and these are both connecting to remote stations, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. And for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it's a great capability that you can achieve such a good performance over what can be a fairly slow internet connection. And then on a more practical note, although I've got an RSP1B here on the desk with an antenna on it, it doesn't pick up anything inside these buildings.
Yeah. And you haven't got space to put an edge of aerial up or that sort of thing. So it's a great way of demonstrating the capabilities of your products.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you for your time. If anyone wants more information about SDRplay, where's the best place for them to go?
Go to our website, www.sdrplay.com.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you later, Chris.
Cheers.
Well, everybody, welcome back there from our feature, our first dive into the people we spoke to at Dayton Hamvention this year. And we'll be completing that round of interviews in our next episode in 2 weeks' time. Of course, we would love to thank not only our friends and colleagues that were there at the show with us, but all the listeners and the exhibitors, etc., that spent time talking to us and made it an extremely enjoyable trip. And I would certainly say that one of the overriding messages we got from talking to people as we went around the show is how much our fellow hams just enjoyed engaging with other hams and just talking about the hobby and talking about life and really just being the most wonderful, sociable bunch of people.
Yeah. And in fairness, once again, like you said, I'd like to thank everybody we met and spoke to. Some were listeners, some weren't. Hopefully they will be at some point in time. But we really enjoyed talking to lots of people. And, okay, there is a picture that Chris Howard's got of me talking to the sheriff. Now, maybe he's never going to become a ham. But let me tell you something, guys. The sheriff said to me he loves doing Hamvention because ham radio people are nice people and you cause him no trouble. You know, he can log on to his shift and enjoy the time spending it with nice people. So that's a positive, I'd say, Colin.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, isn't it great, though, that we're deemed that way more than anything else? So I love that idea. You know, the fact that he knows the fact we're good people. And let's say that's much appreciated, as you say, from there.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, I spoke to a few people. Some said they thought that our podcast was getting a bit long. But for every one of you said, Martin, it's getting a bit long, can you shorten it? Somebody else said to me, Martin, can you make it a bit longer? So I'm calling our catch-22, guys. We normally run to whatever the podcast actually turns out to be. We don't try and set it to a set time. So apologies if you're one of the ones who wants it shorter or longer. You know, it is what it is. And since I've been back, I spoke to a gentleman on the talk group who said he couldn't find us at the Hamvention. Now, when you think Hamvention is absolutely massive, we're there in orange shirts as we always are. But I would say, Colin, almost 5% now of all amateurs are wearing orange shirts so they can be recognised, which doubles us down a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. You know, maybe we should do a thing where we walk around and put a sticker on everybody wearing an orange T-shirt. And we sort of, say, look, obviously you're part of us if you're wearing an orange T-shirt. But got one for us to have a think about from there. You might remember that Fadel Derry, and Fadel's call sign is Mike 0 Sierra Foxtrot Delta, who we met at Dayton Hamvention. He was on the same flight as Martin and Chris were on. When he went out to Cincinnati to head to Dayton. He kindly supported Mrs. B getting a treat and a cup of tea from our visit there. So we've obviously sent that to her. We've got a picture ready to go. Being summertime, Mrs. B did ask for something a little bit cooler than a cup of tea. So we'll put that picture up for you to just show that Mrs. B is a very happy lady being looked after while we were in our absence in the States. And not only only did we have that wonderful support by Fadel for Mrs. B, but while we're in Dayton, Togi Carlson, Kilo 1 Sierra Echo India as well, popped some dollars in our hands and said this is for the show, and so we really do appreciate that, Togi. Thanks a lot there for thinking of us. And of course, our monthly and subscription donors are very important as well. They help, as I say, get a base to pay our bills on the internet and keep your show for you advert free, and as I say, working away for you every fortnight. So we will do it there for you. And just what Martin was saying as well, Pete was saying too long and etc. Well, if we make this promise, we won't do any shows anything other than every fortnight for you, unless there's an absolute special coming out. So at least you've got 2 weeks to work your way through the wonderful ham radio content that hopefully you enjoy every fortnight from us. So as I say, we appreciate all the support that we get and all your wonderful feedback. So thanks a lot for that from there. Right, we'd like to thank Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo for taking part in the News Roundtable. Many thanks for taking part there. Say thanks to all the guys at Dayton Hamvention helping us put together the interviews and do recording interviews, etc. for you that you're going to get over this episode and the following episode as well for you. And more than anything else, thank you to the whole of the ham community for making that trip a very memorable one. We really do appreciate everything on your warmth and etc. to us, so we really do appreciate it there. Right, I think the only thing really left to do is we're going to promote the Digital Talk group here as well. If you want to keep in touch with your presenters, as I say, that you might have met brand new or now know what they look like after meeting them in person, you can keep in touch with them by checking out the ICQ Podcast Digital Talk group. And as I say, there's a page on our website of how to get involved there. So do check that out. It's a fantastic resource, no matter what version of digital radio you're running. It doesn't matter, because I say we will do all the transcoding magic in the middle for you and make it all work for you. So as I say, check that out and have fun from there. Right, well, as I say, now you're back on duty, Dad, so you've really got to make Mum a cup of tea and a lovely treat. And as I say, look after her. Now you're back in situation, back in London.
Yeah, certainly will, Colin. Well, I'm going to make your mum a nice cup of tea in a minute, find her a chocolate picky, and then we're going to put her feet up for a little while. So that's the initial plan for the day. But hopefully I might get on air today as well, which is great fun. I enjoyed being on air in Chicago at Scott McDonald's shack, and I'm looking forward to doing a bit more on air. So after I've made your mum a cup of tea and we've had a few minutes, maybe I'll get on air.
Exactly, no problems at all. Well, we're going to bid 73s to you all, and as I say, wish you a wonderful enjoyment of our wonderful hobby, and we'll catch you again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
Yeah, 73.